That's her, that's a letter from Wellesley.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Norfolk Board of Selectmen's meeting of Wednesday, March 13th. My name is Jim Lehan. My associate, Mr. Calcutt, has joined us, our interim town administrator, Mr. Lindmark, our executive assistant, Sue Jacobson, and we have our consultant, Mr. Lynch. And in the audience, we have our HR director, Mr. Bragdon. Would you please, I want to remind everybody that this meeting is being both audio and videotaped and may be found through Norfolk Cable or on YouTube. Would you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. We have one purpose here today. We are going to be interviewing 3 finalists for the town administrator position. We're excited. We think we have 3 outstanding candidates. And to lead this off, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Lynch.
Well, thank you. I would echo your comments regarding the candidates that you have before you. We, as you know, this was the second go-around for us because we weren't able to reach a conclusion with the first round of candidates, but we went back out and we re-advertised the position. We went back to a number of people that we had spoken to before, as well as some new people, and we actually got a very good response in this second go-around in this recruitment process. I think in the end we had 42 individuals that had in total that applied this during this round. My recollection is, I should have jotted these numbers down before I came in, but my recollection is we had 15 people that from the prior search that asked that they be reconsidered, and we had 27 new applicants. The screening committee met and determined the 6 people that they would interview, which they did this past Saturday. Again, very strong candidates that we looked at. And coming out of that, the screening committee identified these 3 that you'll be talking to today. The first would be William Chenard, the deputy town administrator for the town of Natick. He's served in that capacity for a number of years now, and also has experience as the director of. Well, I should note that his experience as deputy town administrator has also required him to serve as interim town administrator for a period of time, as well as being involved in all aspects of the town government, from budget to general operations of the town, the HR responsibilities, and interaction with the public on a regular basis. Prior to that, he serves as the DPW director in Natick, and his background also includes finance and assessing and property assessments and technology. So he has a very varied background. He served in the Air Force before that. The second candidate is Michael Borg. He's the Director of Public Facilities for the City of Providence, Rhode Island. That follows a stint as the Director of Public Works for the City of Providence, which follows a stint as the Director of Emergency Management for the City of Providence, all with the same mayor who has moved him through as needed for particular assignments within the city administration. Comes highly recommended. His background, though, prior to that, is he served in the military, in the Army as a colonel. So again, has great leadership skills, organizational skills, tactical skills that he brings to bear, and again has been a go-to person for the mayor of Providence as he has sought to improve the local government of that city. And the third candidate is Blythe Robinson. Blythe recently concluded 3 years with the town of Wellesley as their executive director. Wellesley is a unique animal in the municipal government world. It's a very flat organization, a number of different elected bodies, and they've been looking at changing that form of government a little bit and going through a transition. They've opted to stay with that and brought Blythe on. She served to sort of move the town forward in a number of areas, and now has left there to pursue other options. Prior to serving in Wellesley, though, she served as the town manager, the first town manager for the town of Upton, Massachusetts for about 6 years, and had a number of stints before that as an assistant in a couple of communities in Connecticut, and a number of other assignments, some overseas assignments, in fact. Her spouse served also as a local government official and served various locations around the country as well as overseas, and that brought her to a number of different locations. Again, good experience, very knowledgeable of all aspects of municipal operations. And importantly, all three candidates come highly recommended. We've provided you, since Saturday, we've been making a lot of phone calls to people and generating this report that outlines what the feedback that we received from the references that we called. We know a number of these people that we've spoken to because of our connections to local government. So we've had very frank discussions with each one of these people and gotten a good feel for the strengths of each of the candidates and what they could bring. We've also done a background check on the candidates. We've verified their education. We've verified their criminal history. They're not criminals. That's a good thing. So we have that as well. And I've provided you with a set of questions. I know you have your own set of questions that you've used in the past, but these are some other ones if you wanted to use those. And I know you have copies of their resumes and cover letters. So happy to answer any questions that you might have, but I think you've got some good choices ahead of you, and they've been fully vetted and ready to go.
Kevin?
No questions on mine. Thank you very much.
No questions on my end. Just a comment, Bernie, I want to thank you for the hard work you put into this, and
Certainly.
I'm impressed that you were able to drum up 27 new applications. That's
It's one of those situations.
timing, isn't it?
It's a lot of it's timing. The dynamics changed a little bit, and people that I had reached out to before weren't in a position to apply before, but then were. So,
Welcome.
Mr. Chenard.
How are you?
Good to meet you.
Hi, Jim Lehan, pleasure. Nice to meet you as well, sir.
Bill, you're going to sit right there.
We also have Sue Jacobson, the executive assistant for the town of Norfolk. and
Chief Post
Todd Whitmore,
Automatic.
who is our interim town administrator.
Nice to meet you both.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to have you with us. Thank you for taking an afternoon and joining us, and more importantly, we appreciate your considering our position here in Norfolk.
My pleasure.
Nice to have you here. Why don't we start off by giving you a chance, by the way, I want to let you know we are on live TV. Give you a chance to share a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
Let me get this out of the way if you don't mind.
I have a long history of municipal service. Prior to that, I did a stint with the U.S. Air Force. Very proud of that. And worked for Tyler Corporation. You folks don't use them here, but they're a municipal services company, mostly software products. And did some consulting throughout New England and one stint in Florida with them. So as a municipal employee, I've done pretty much everything, either as a full-time employee or as an interim fill-in in many positions. Full-time employee, obviously I've been a director of assessing. I've worked for the city of Newton in the assessing world and the town of Natick. Came back to the town of Natick as a business manager. They said, we need you back, we want you now. And I said, all right, I'm tired of driving to Newton, I'll come back to Natick. Did that. Been in the finance world, built budgets from much bigger budgets than you folks have here, but in the $150 to $160 million range as an operating budget, about 14 to $16 million as enterprise budgets. Capital plans ranging in the early years in the $130 million range, and more recent years closer to $300 million. Obviously, we have built a couple of schools in that range, which is why they're up there. We're currently in the process of, in fact, we just opened bids and just awarded a contract for a new middle school of $109 million. That's an all-in price. I have done economic development in my career. I've been an acting town administrator for several months and several short stints in between. Acting facilities director, acting human resources director. When it comes to municipal government, except for a school department, I've pretty much done it all. So Education, I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Maine. I have a graduate from Yale University, which is a Squadron Officer School. It's a certificate program that's a graduate level certificate program, and I am a great leadership program. So,
Great. Well, welcome.
thank you.
May I ask the
Go
first?
right ahead.
Why Norfolk?
Why Norfolk? So I am very picky about where I apply, and as I told the search committee on Saturday, I didn't apply in Norfolk the first time because I honestly didn't have time to research. I didn't have time to research you folks. I felt that if I'm going to make a commitment through the interview process, I want to know what I'm getting into. I want to know what type of community you are. I have applied in a few, very small percentage of those that have been out there, and I have been a finalist in every single place I've applied because I make sure it's a fit for me. I have a friend of mine says, Bill, you got to tell them about the history of success. Everything you do, you're successful at. And I'm successful at it because I'm very picky about where I put myself. I don't put myself in a position where I can't be successful. So I've done a ton of research on Norfolk. I've spent over 41 hours now here looking at everything from your infrastructure to reviewing your budgets, to reviewing your history, even the good and bad. It is a good fit for me, and I think I'm a good fit for you. So I can be successful here, and that's what I want to do.
Kevin?
Well, I'm going to go back to your experience for a quick moment, if that's okay.
Sure.
Your last position or your current position is Deputy Town Administrator in Natick. Can you tell me how that responsibility set contrasts against the full town administrator role?
So, town administrator does here. It is, we build the budgets, we build the capital plans, we're responsible for the operations day to day, except for schools. My direct reports are pretty much wide-ranging: facilities director, public works director, IT director, human resources, and procurement manager. So I'm basically responsible for all of that. I'm directly responsible for the capital plan. I'm the person who puts it together, puts the management practices, and sends that out, gets the feedback, reviews it, makes recommendations to the boards. Budget, I have done it 100% where I was responsible for the completion of the budget in years. We have a very good finance director right now. So I only assist with the budget this year, which I am really pleased because of the way our charter and bylaw works with budgeting is very difficult. Our budgets are due in December, which is very early compared to most municipal governments in Massachusetts. So we are working with estimates and a lot of unknown factors in our budgeting process. We don't know what our state aid is. We don't know what our healthcare numbers are. We have to estimate those and do a ton of research to get that accurate. So you asked, Deputy, what else? Let's see. Just day-to-day management of the office space. All of that is pretty much a direct relation to what you folks do here, what the town administrator does here.
Very good. And I'd like to throw in there, we have a pretty good finance director here as well, so.
I will second
Excellent.
that. I have to follow up on your comment. Unfortunately, it's not. But why are your budgets due in December? You have no actuals. You have no estimates on state aid. How do you? Have you been able to manage that with any reasonable degree of accuracy?
So what we do is we get our budgets done, and it's a pretty unique process as Massachusetts governments go. You can do it with some accuracy. We fortunately have two required town meetings. We typically have 4, but 2 required, a spring and a fall. Our spring is very early. Obviously, with a budget due in December, your town meeting is way ahead of schedule on that. So we were able to make some corrections at our fall town meeting if we missed something. But it is still a challenge because the bulk of your votes are done early on, before most of that information is known. And you're right. I mean, we have partial year action. We're actually building the budget October, November, so we can have it to hand out. Capital the first working day in December, and the fiscal budget the first working day in January. So we're done at that point with our budgets, and you have to make some modifications at the mid-year at that point. And it's only difficult if you overestimated revenues or where you have to make an adjustment and you have to make budget cuts because you're already into the fiscal year at that point. You've already started, people are already spending money that have been allocated and appropriated.
Go right ahead.
Tell me about your first 90 days in Norfolk.
So my first 90 days in Norfolk, I actually spent a great deal of time thinking about that. It is a get to know people, get to understand what the expectations of the board are. I have a pretty good handle on where you guys at by reading through all of your minutes and all of that. So not all the minutes, there's a lot of minutes out there, but several meetings. Watching some of your public access TV programs just to see how things go. It's a get to know process. Department heads or directors, I don't know, I guess you refer to most of them as department heads. The chiefs, obviously, you're going to be looking for a new chief soon. That's unfortunate because he's been here a long time and unbelievably respected based on my interaction with the community. So, bring him in. I do it about every other year with my direct reports now, where I'll bring in a bunch of people them and their reports, and I ask 3 questions. What's the best thing that you like about working for the town of Norfolk? What's the worst? And what would be the one thing you would do to make this a better place to work? And just listen to people, because you can learn a lot about the organization by asking those 3 questions and getting to know the staff. I would, which may sound a little bit weird, but I would attend on a regular basis, probably for a solid month, every single meeting I possibly could. Planning, zoning, conservation. You might think that's daunting. Coming from Natick, it's not daunting. From January through the second week in May, the administrators, are in 3 or 4 night meetings a week. So it probably wouldn't be any different than what I'm used to there. See what goes on. And I've done a ton of research, and I've read a ton about your community, but you don't know everything until you actually get here. And you take a good, solid look about where things are going and understand who the players are. You're going to have some folks that are superstars that I'm going to want to mentor. You're going to have some folks that, unfortunately, may not be superstars that I'm going to want to set some goals and objectives and make them superstars. So, the first 90 days is set it out, lay it out, understand, get to know. Unless there's something that the board wants done immediately, and obviously the budgeting portion is going to be important. Your town meeting coming up, first week in May, second week in May. Those things are going to be important to make sure that's done. Obviously, there's a time frame here, feedback, to make sure that stuff happens and happens. Hopefully as seamlessly as possible. But unless there's an objective where we need to fix something, let's get to know the community before we try to fix something that I'm not aware of.
Speaking of getting to know the community, economic development is a big opportunity that we have in front of us as a town. Talk to me about your experience in working with economic development and some insight that you might have on our specific situation.
Yeah, so in Natick, economic development for us comes fairly easy. But there's a few things we have done to make it easier. You get out there and you have to talk to the players. You have to, it's almost advertising your community. Create a marketing plan so that you can say, hey, Norfolk is great. And there's some really good talking points there. There's a lot of tech companies, there's a lot of bioengineering companies that are looking for space in the suburbs surrounding the Boston-Cambridge market. Some because they're just starved out of space, some because they can't afford that space, even though the marketplace there is quite, robust and strong. It also increases rents for them. Norfolk is close enough to 495 if you're going north-south, east-west 95. You can get there. You leave this building and you're on those roads within minutes. So you talk that up. You talk about space. The one thing that's a negative for Norfolk, in comparison to places like Natick, is the tax rate. 1829, your tax rate, we're in the low 13s and going down. You start comparing yourself to some of those commercial spaces, you're actually a little bit of a lower tax rate, but those commercial spaces are forced to offer TIFs and other tax incentives to get people in here. And I don't know. I tried to do some research about Norfolk, your history with that. So you may have to, in the initial years, offer some type of a tax break, but you want to structure that in a manner. I am completely opposed to tax breaks there's some, there's, the city of Marlborough gave a tax break to a bio company. Got great employment, and all of that's great, and that's probably what they were looking for. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it from a financial standpoint, but they're not paying any taxes for 10 years. There's a lot of those stories out there. The town of Framingham, right next to Natick, has a tax rate that's almost 3 times, not 3 times, but 2.5 times Natick. And they have great, they're a robust community and showing terrific growth right now in the commercial sector, but they're offering huge tax incentives. So we have a single tax rate in Natick. We don't, with our commercial base, everybody says, I'm sure even Bernie would tell you why, but why we do that is because we've had tremendous success in attracting businesses. If you look at where we're at with MathWorks and Natick Mall, Cognex, and the newest with Abbey Labs and some of those spaces. I'm sure you interviewed Jamie, Jamie must have highlighted Abbey Labs and that, must have highlighted Exponent. We are very good in Natick about attracting people. The other thing you can do is, I want to use the word streamline, but it's not really streamline, your processes for applications and getting people through your boards and committees. You don't want to streamline that because you don't want to shortchange your community. But you want to put together a booklet that tells the developers, here's what you have to do, and here's are the steps to do that. And when they come and ask, how do I get on the agenda, show them and help them get there. Walk them through the process, because if you get one good, solid company that is known in the industry that comes in here and does some advancement because you did something right and you walked them through the process, don't shortchange your process. Make sure that the zoning is required, and if they need something from the ZBA, that when they visit Conservation Commission and the Planning Board, that all of those things are handled properly, but help them through the process.
Mm-hmm.
And then let them go get it and get it done.
Very good. Thank you.
A little bit more on economic development. We have no major roads.
Mm-hmm.
We have one stoplight. We have very limited commercial property. And what commercial property, in terms of what the town owns, is really one spot. What is available is, again, very limited. We have one large area, Southwood, which is the old hospital,
Mm-hmm. Owned by the church.
which is owned by the Archdiocese.
Mhm.
So we get no say as to what goes in there, as long as they conform to zoning and so on. So as you look at our town and the research that you looked at, we're positioned in a way where it's hard to break out of being a residential-based community, residential tax-based community. Do you see another way around that? Do you see, look, we are who we are, so to speak.
Mhm.
And how do you see that in terms of developing businesses?
So that is a huge challenge, and you could go out there and you could attract the businesses, but they're the wrong type of businesses. I mean, and so you don't want to just bring in business because you can bring in business. You want to bring in the right type of business, the good corporate handholders, good corporate partners with the community. And so it is a challenge. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I can solve that overnight, because I can't. I mean, and if anybody tells you they can, they probably can't, unless they have millions or billions of dollars in their pocket and they're going to develop it themselves. So it is a large challenge, but you have to continue to work. And it's funny when you say that. You made the comment that we have limited commercial, and we have, we don't have major roads. Well, you have 115, you have 1A, and you're not, like I said, you're not far from 95 and 495. So we present that and show that. Just keep working with the developers. You have some pretty good projects that have gone up here. Some of them are 40B projects, but as the community goes, you've done okay now. Your future with 40B, maybe not so much, but it depends on where those end up through the process. But some of those are just started or haven't even started that process. Maybe work with some of those 40B developers to do a mixed commercial residential project. There are some people out there that do some great projects where they're looking for that residential. You get what you need. And when I say that, affordable housing, so you can get to your 10% number, and go through your housing production plan, which good thing you do. And as I said on Saturday, make sure you keep that updated. It expires in 2022, so don't miss that deadline, because that's critical. But bring in that and work with some of those developers to see if you can actually get a commercial residential partnership.
Great, thanks. Kelly?
Well, my associate knows that I'll never waste an opportunity for a good segue. So while you're on the subject of 40B, can you talk to me about your experience in dealing with some of the mitigation efforts to help find ways around being at the will of developers when it comes to this instance?
So finding ways around it is to stick to your housing production plan and get to the 10% over the 1.5% land, which unfortunately in Norfolk right now, you're not close to either. You're about halfway there. And so,
Sue is our, by the way, our affordable housing director as well. Sue Jacobs.
oh, okay. So she's your 40B person. Sort of.
I'm not sure she would like that, Blythe.
I understand. And I don't mean to be flip, but when you're below that 10% number, your affordable housing is your 40B, unfortunately. 40Bs are incredibly challenging. We've had several in Natick, and we have one application that's going through the approval process now. It isn't always a bad relationship. There are some attorneys out there that are not as community friendly as one might like. But I think you have to have the right people in place to work with those folks. I always share something. You have to communicate what your needs and wants are, and tell them that process can be easier for them and you if they can help you out with those needs and wants. In Natick, we've had some very successful. We are fortunate where we've had mostly friendly 40Bs. In fact, I don't know that we've had an unfriendly. But part of that is because we expressed very early on. We are currently over 10%, going to be going below 10% at our next census. And we've been below 10% in the past. So we've lived on both sides of that fence. But you need to express what your needs and wants are. And you need to tell them, please ask them politely, please work with us, and don't just deal attorney to attorney. Get some face-to-face time with the folks that are paying those bills, because some of the attorneys are very aggressive when it comes to 40B, and they know that the law's on their side. It is if you shut them down completely, you're not going to get what you want. But we have been incredibly fortunate. We've gotten $500,000 for our rail trail project. We got $1 million for our fire station project, and we got $750,000 for a ladder truck, which we asked them and went back and didn't end up buying a ladder truck. We bought another fire truck, but we have had great success in that area. And the new one, I forget what the ask was, and I should know this because I just reviewed this and just communicated. He's pulling back a little bit. He got a little bit scared off, not by the town, but by interest rates and some other factors in the area. So he's going to delay probably 3 to 4 months and then re-enter the process. So.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Sure.
Thanks. So it sounds like, from the developer to town perspective, that relationship you have a pretty good experience base with. Can you talk to me a little bit about the experience of the town with the residents in terms of 40B projects?
So it's mixed. Some of our 40B projects have been received incredibly well. We've I hate to use the term, overuse the term, but we've marketed it in the sense that, we needed the 40B to get to our 10% number, and we knew what our potential risk was if we didn't get there. So we did that. Unfortunately, the new 40B project is right next to the old 40B project across the street from the Natick Mall. If you're familiar with that, the plaza, with the Hampton Inn and some of that space, it's in the back of that, essentially the new one. And if you know those 3 towers that are back there that were built before, the new one's right next to the old one. So the West Natick neighborhood is pushing back and challenging that somewhat. I will tell you, they're not nearly challenging it as aggressively as your folks are challenging your upcoming 40B with the gravel pit project. We don't have websites that are up and running and saying how bad that's going to be. And I don't know. I mean, I would have to do a lot more reading about that project to say whether it's good or bad. But we are, part of that is communicating to the residents. Hold the neighborhood groups, ask for the input. Find out who the informal leader is of that neighborhood group. Put them in touch with the developer, and talk about why it's important. Why it's important to have affordable housing and to get to your 10% so that you can start to control your own development, so the zoning can kick in. Those are all important factors, and people are smart, especially Norfolk and Natick. People are smart and people are reasonable. They don't just want to shut down projects for the sake of shutting down projects. There's the NIMBY factor, you're not in my backyard, but people still understand, and if it's done right, and give them a seat at the table, let them have some input, as limited as that can be, in a 40B project, and allow a good, healthy discourse, a good basis for communication. So, and you'll find that we have found, and I'm sure it will happen here also, that you can be very successful with that.
Very good, thank you.
I'd like to ask a follow-up on that as well.
Sure.
I mean, I know you're obviously very familiar with the process, and the ZBA holds the controlling
Mhm.
wand, if you will,
Well-
in terms of the project. Tell me how you would see yourself working with the ZBA and how you'd integrate in part of that role.
Well, you're right, the ZBA holds the majority of that process, but this board does have some control over some of the mitigation factors, and there are agreements the Board of Selectmen can make with a 40B developer for some mitigation outside of the ZBA process. So the ZBA holds that control, but you have to give it to them. They're the officials that
I'm sorry.
actually control
you.
that. So you have to give them that control. It's theirs.
No, I wasn't suggesting
yeah.
you wouldn't, but I'm curious in how you would see your role in working with them to help them through that process.
Well, again, you as a town administrator, you have to communicate with the ZBA chair and the members of the board, and they may, I know in Natick, the chair isn't always the leader of the board. The chair is the elected official, but there is sometimes an informal leader who has a lot more power behind the scenes, and you want to engage them, you want to communicate with them, and express the needs of this board to them through the town administrator. That's the town administrator's role, or it's your role too if you wanted to take that on. And just, if you haven't asked for mitigation, go to the ZBA and say, hey, we want to negotiate with this person because we have some mitigation requests. The one mitigation request I would be asking every 40B developer in the town of Norfolk is wells, wells, wells. And I would be pushing that very hard. Now, obviously, wells, wells, wells is very difficult because you got the DEP and you need your permitting process. So there's a back and forth challenge there. But it's the one thing that would concern me about economic development.
Kevin?
So we touched briefly, and I'll take a step back from the specific scope of 40Bs, but you talked briefly about dealing with projects that are met with some resistance in the community. Can you tell me about a time where you had to mitigate that kind of resistance? It doesn't have to be related to housing. It could be in any facet of your responsibilities.
Which one? As a town administrator, there's always going to be some resistance, and nobody's ever going to be 100% happy. I'll share something that happened last spring, probably about this time. It's unfortunately, it's mating season for the coyotes again. So, and we had an incident where a young lady let a puppy, or well, I guess it wasn't a puppy, but it was a small dog, off a leash in a neighborhood that abuts our town forest, and unfortunately 2 coyotes got the dog. And the mother was horrified that this young teenager had to witness this and wanted us to basically go hunt all the coyotes. And they filled the Board of Selectmen's room. They filled the town administrator's office, and it was meeting after meeting after meeting. And one thing you can do is understand and listen. Never turn someone away. The worst thing you could possibly do is someone comes, and I've seen people do it. Every day someone does this where they tell their staff, I'm going in the office, I'm shutting the door, and don't disturb me. Well, I do that because I need to do work myself, but I will always instruct my staff, I'm going in the office. If somebody comes in that situation, you want to talk to them. You want to, and you don't need to talk, you need to listen. You need to listen and understand. If it's something you know nothing about, I knew nothing about coyotes. I've hunted early on in my life. I don't anymore, haven't for 20 years maybe, just as a teenager. So develop as much knowledge around the subject as you can. I actually engaged Mass DEP, not DP, DCR. I always say that. I'm dealing with DEP too much lately. Mass DCR, they have some coyote experts on staff there that are really, really good. We actually spent a few $100s and brought in a coyote management expert that's licensed with the state. He went out, he tracked some of the coyotes, looked for the alpha male, alpha female, gave us an idea of the population in the town for us. We found out as much about that as we possibly could, and we shared that with a group of residents. You know, there were a couple of those folks that still weren't happy. They wanted us to give them permits to go hunt them in the town forest. And we built a whole coyote section on our website for information for our public, because you don't want that to happen again. But coyotes by nature are pretty skitsy. You make a lot of noise and make you, scream and yell. They're going to, 99% of the time, they're going to be gone because they're afraid of that. Bang some pans or whatever if they're in your backyards. And we were pretty successful in mitigating that, but those folks were very, very angry when they came in. And so that's one example. There's many more individual type examples. That's where we had actually a crowd that was pretty upset. I've dealt with things from someone gets a water bill that's way out of whack, and they come in and they're screaming, "I can't afford this. I can't possibly use that much water. It's 20 times normal." I deal with that too. That's part of my responsibility. What we do in Natick is we send staff to their house. We have water department people that are visiting people's houses doing leak tests and leak detection every single day of the year. Well, every work day of the year, not every single day. We don't do it on Christmas or holidays or most weekends unless there's an active leak. And we find a leak for them, and we help them out. And we have an abatement policy. If we find a leak and the leak is mitigated and they can prove they fixed it, we will abate a portion of that bill. We still bill all the water, but we reduce it. We are an MWR community, so our sewer rates are very, very high. Our water rates we're all wells like you folks. I mean, we have 10 well sites, and we pump 3 to 5 million gallons a day, depending upon time of year. So, from the water side, we manage that well. But you listen. A lot of them come talk to you and listen to what they're saying. And I have a catchphrase that I used to tell my staff when I took over as the Director of Public Works in Natick. The staff was pretty aggressive. And I don't mean aggressive their response is someone would come in and say, "Hey, I need you to do this," and you would get, "No bleeping way am I doing that for you." It's a lot easier and a lot more successful when an angry person comes in if you take a few moments and explain to them, "I'm sorry, we can't do this. The policy is this, and this is why, this is why, this is why." And then go one more step and tell them what you can do for them. You can really just step back from that and stay calm. I say this, I rarely ever get upset. There's probably 3 times in the last 15 years where I've really lost my cool. And I would argue all 3 times were justified. It doesn't do anybody any good if you lose your cool. And I shouldn't have lost my cool those 3 times. But, 3 times in 20 years is a good thing.
Exceptional average, I might add. Let me turn to finance.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit more detail around your role in finances in Natick.
So it's huge. I have, obviously I was a business manager, but I've played throughout my career, at least my Natick side career, a large role on the finance team. Even when I was a DPW director, I was a member of the town administrators, what she called her cabinet, which was a group of 4 high-level advisors where we talked about most of his finance, because that's usually what's going on. We do have a very strong finance director today, so I've backed off of that role, but prior to that, I played an active role in finance. I played an active role from day one, even of the budgeting process, but even with the assessing process. Understanding, because I understand appraisal theory, I understand assessing theory, I understand the statutes with that, and that's a huge aspect. Financial modeling in Massachusetts and understanding finances, there's a lot of gut-yous in the statutes. You start talking about Chapter 40, Chapter 44, Chapter 59, 60, all at 70, 90. Most people don't even know what those are. My kids, they laugh at me. They say, "Dad, what are you doing?" That's not exactly how they say it. There's a few explicatives in there. Because I will, probably once a year, I'll grab the statutes and I'll just sit there and I'll read them. There's too many things that will come and bite you in the butt if you don't know them. One of the big ones recently that most of my colleagues haven't even thought about, which I find kind of funny, is the Municipal Modernization Act changed how we borrow money. 44.7, 44.8 has a lot of subclauses in it, and when you do your bonding and your borrowing and your votes at town meeting, you need to make sure you cite the right statute, and they've changed. They've changed dramatically. The DOR, and it has a very good grid right now that shows what the old versus the new is. I strongly recommend, even if you don't hire me, get a copy of that grid and make sure your next town administrator has it in hand. Because it's important to make sure you get it right. It can stop a project dead if you got the wrong statute, and the day you go to borrow, your bond counsel, or a few days before, bond counsel says, oh, you can't borrow because your town meeting vote wasn't correct. So then you have to have another town meeting to correct that. Understand statutes, and because the statutes are important around municipal finance. But getting back to my direct experience, from assessing, budgeting, from day one through working with department heads, working with Board of Selectmen, working with the Finance Committee, you call it your advisory committee, getting those approvals, going to town meeting, make sure you got the approvals, get the appropriation, make sure it's in the system and award it to the departments, monitor the spend. I approve all purchase orders over $10,000 today. That's my role. Town administrator is not involved at all with the finance side on that. Understand procurement law. Again, another statute, 30B, Chapter 149, Chapter 7. Make sure that those things, again, the IG comes visit and say, hey, we want to audit this stuff. And they're doing a lot of audits lately. There's a few communities out there that have gotten hit by that. Make sure your procurement's correct. And then through the year-end close, Schedule A's. I mean, I'm sure your finance people do all of this, but I understand it. I've done it. I work with the finance team to do that. Schedule A's, free cash certification. You guys have enterprise funds, so your retained earnings certification. Retained earnings, I'm sure you know, but if you don't, it's just free cash for enterprise funds. And then start all over again. Get your town meeting votes, your certs, recap, set your new tax rate, your next year starts. We monitor our budgets on a monthly basis. We start our budgets right after the beginning of the fiscal year. We're starting our budget process from an administration standpoint with our revenue estimates in August. Goes out to the department heads the end of September, early October. And again, we talked about that earlier, where we are from there. So from financial management, 100%. That's probably my strongest suit. There's nothing I haven't done, from bonding to day-to-day management of finances.
Kevin?
No follow-up question on finances? Surprised.
I'm not done yet.
Oh, there we go. So before, you had talked about a little bit about your management style and how you like to manage people up and how you like to, pretty much prepare them for whatever next steps are coming up in their future. Talk to us a little bit more about how you deal with managing different personalities, especially those that are in much different departments.
Sure. Yeah, so I meet weekly with all my direct reports. Today screwed that up because Wednesday is my meeting day. So a few of those are tomorrow and Friday. And you manage, generally my management style is collaborative. I share with everybody, and my kids have heard it way too much, my 4 C's, that communicate, collaborate, cooperate, and compromise. Those 4 things, if you live by those principles, you're going to do really well, because it has led me to the success I've had. But management style isn't one management style. Generally, I'm a collaborative manager. I love the team approach. I love when people work well as a team, and I don't even have to lead that team 100%. Sometimes it depends on the topic. Sometimes you have great leaders. There's many topics where I could be the leader, but I step back because you got somebody who's enthusiastic and a super leader, and I let them lead. And I find that has been a successful strategy over time. But individuals, I'll talk about, I don't want to name people, and I did this in an interview once, and folks said, hey, I didn't name them, but they all knew who they were. So I have one department head who is the head of a very large department, who is a really bright guy, super education, and really aggressive leader. And my style with him is to let him do his thing, because he rarely makes a mistake, but to kind of, I'll recall a meeting I had with him where I said, you know what, you're really smart, and I consider you a superstar, but sometimes you step on yourself. Don't take it too far. Just kind of tell them what they need to know, and don't make it about you. It doesn't have to be about you. It's more important that it's about the team approach and about Are you better getting a vote because you didn't make it about you and you explain the need for it than not getting a vote because someone's mad at you because you made it about you? So back off. So my management style with him is let him do his thing. Terrific guy, smart, good leader, good manager, but to kind of pull him back a little bit, to keep him within himself, really. I have another superstar. She is outstanding, similar education to him, really, really smart, who is incredibly timid. One of the best speakers I've ever seen speak at a public meeting, far better than I am, and yet she's afraid to get out there. So I mentor her. We role play before she has a big public speech. If she's going to be speaking at a town meeting or if she's going to be speaking before a large group of people about a subject, we role play it. You know, what if someone asked you this, and I ask her questions to try to put her off guard, mentor her and allow her. And now I said, okay, at the end of that role playing, the comment I make is, so what's the worst could happen? You know, and she goes, well, what if I don't know the answer? I said, if you don't know the answer, you say, I don't know the answer, but I will get you the answer. And you leave it like that, because if you don't know, you're better off telling them you don't know. People are going to respect you so much more. I don't know everything. I'll tell you, I've been doing this a long time, and I know a hell of a lot about municipal government and just about everything that's out there, but I don't know everything. But I know where to go and find it, which is sometimes more important than actually being able to answer and know the answer to that question. So, and then I have a third person who is, for lack of a better word, incredibly lazy. And what I do with that individual, we meet weekly. We talk about where we are with his goals. We talk about where we are with projects, and we adjust goals where necessary. Once a month, we have a goals meeting to see. We set our goals at the beginning of the fiscal year. Actually, we set them before the beginning of the fiscal year, and we work on them through. We have a monthly review, a quarterly review, and do that. And we adjust them where necessary. Sometimes you'll set goals and something happens. And you just can't get there, and you need to refocus those goals on another project. And so you refocus the goals and you move on. So it's dependent upon the person for my management style. I'm completely laid back and do nothing with the first guy except rein him in a little bit, push and mentor my second person, and set the goals and hold that person's feet to the fire to make sure they get there with the third person. So generally collaborative, but different depending upon their personalities.
You're good.
I hate to say it, but I want to go back to finance.
That's fine. Finance is my comfort zone.
You mentioned earlier that you have an extensive capital plan.
Yes.
How far out is that forecasted? And
So-
how do you go about it?
So what we do is, on an annual basis, we have, the capital plan is due to be released and published on the first working day. Actually, the bylaw says 30 days prior to the budget, which makes it essentially the first
Do
working
you,
day.
you
in
have a
December.
bylaw that requires you to have a capital plan in place?
Well, yes, but not to the extent we do. We do have a bylaw that requires a capital plan. So the capital plan wants a list of capital items. So our capital plan by bylaw needs to list our projected items for 5 years. We actually have items on our capital plan out 20 years, not 100%, but based on useful life, we want to know. We want to be able to plan those budgets and what we're going to have for capital planning. We've been very fortunate in Natick. We get tremendous support for capital projects. We have an extensive capital plan right now. It's in transition right now because we just had our updates and we're going through our FY20 budget for a capital budget for approval at town meeting. So we're right in the middle of that mess right now. The plan is detailed. It has individual pages, I think it's about 490 or so pages this year. And what it does is it has your capital budget for your next upcoming year, which is 2020, and then it has your 2021 through 2024 all printed. We don't put in print beyond that, even though there's some detail in there. We have replaced, I'll take a police car, for example. We'll have the replacement to the replacement of the current, 2 generations out, just to try and plan that, which takes us beyond 5 years typically. Same thing with building systems and roofs. Building systems and roofs, I'd like to be a little more aggressive than we are. But we're there. You want to make sure that your envelopes your roofs. There's nothing, roofs and roads, there's nothing worse than letting them get too far, because if you replace them when you need to replace them, you're gonna spend X amount of dollars or X amount of square feet on a roof. If you let them get beyond, you're gonna spend 3 or 4 times what you would have if you replace them in a timely manner, because you're gonna have leaks, you're gonna have insulation problems, you're gonna have rot problems, you're gonna have ceiling problems, and you're gonna end up replacing the insulation, the rotted underlayment, and the ceilings. So never let that happen. And that's why we do an aggressive capital plan in Natick. We have new buildings. There are wants and needs on our capital plans. We've had a master plan for a field where they want to take our, they call it the gravel pit, but it's not really a gravel pit. It's a public works site where they, store equipment and some other stuff, and they want to make it a ball field. We can't afford to do that because there's no other place to store that equipment or the salt that's there. So it's been on our capital plan, our 5-year capital plan, for probably 15 or 20 years. But you want to keep it there because if you ever do have a transition where you can do that, you want to be able to follow through with that. So on our capital plan, we have the detail about how we're going to finance it or pay for it with cash. We have financial principles around that. Anything more than $1 million is an ask of the Board of Selectmen, whether they want to consider a debt exclusion override. The majority of our capital is not done with debt exclusion overrides. Obviously, your larger buildings, schools and the community senior center were done with debt exclusion overrides. So,
I think we have time for maybe one more each. Sir?
So currently in town, we're in the process of putting the finishing touches on a large-scale municipal building project with our new police station, and we have another one coming up with a fire station. You talked before about being part of some school projects in terms of new municipal buildings. Can you tell me some of the things that you've experienced in those processes?
sure. So when it comes to new municipal buildings, that's another area where I've played a very, very large role as either the project manager. Not so much the school buildings, because the statute requires you to have an OPM because of the cost of those. I've been on the building committee for those, and I am currently on the building committee for both our new fire station, which is a substation, a $16 million substation. Yeah, I know. In a new school. I do serve on the building committees for those. We did a complete new renovation to a DPW facility. I managed that project as a member of the team. We didn't have a lot of team members at the time, so I played a very large role in that. That was a multi-million-dollar project. Myself and the facilities manager, who was relatively new on scene at that time, did 2 school renovation additions. I'm quite proud of those. We actually did something pretty unique to Massachusetts, where we did some research and we did permanent modular construction. You're familiar with a house, the modular house concept, where they build the foundation and they bring in the house and they build it. That we did the same thing with schools. And the cost per square foot at the time was ranging between $390 and $450, and it's actually gone. Some of the new schools are even $500 a square foot. We built those facilities for the first one for under $200 a square foot. The second one just under $250 per square foot. Yeah.
How recent was this?
The second one opened a year and a half ago. It opened at the school beginning of school September. A year and a half ago now. The first one was the year before that. So we were able to add six classrooms at 2 elementary schools on a modular basis. I know you folks are going to be doing some work to a modular, and I know you're going to probably, based on your 40B count, be having some pressure on enrollment also. So something to consider. You bid it. There's a little bit different bidding process for that, because it's more of a design build project because it's a modular, but they're beautiful. I would strongly recommend you folks in the schools, the superintendent and whoever she has for managing her process, come take a look at what we did in Natick, because when they first went up, the parents were like, I don't want my kid in a modular, and today they're fighting for the space because the superintendent at the time, who has now left, but calls them his 21st century classrooms, and they truly are. They are really beautiful space, under demand, and even the teachers want them. So it worked out really well for us. Other projects I've been involved in. a ton of small projects. You probably don't need to hear about those, but if there's other questions or you want me to follow up, I'm happy to do that. But everything from walkways to street paving to small building projects throughout the town. We're in a process because our municipal complex is reaching that 20-year point, so we're in a process of doing a ton of roof projects right now. So,
Very good. What questions do you have for us?
well, I will ask. I got my questions answered on Saturday. The screening committee was very good at that. The one question I have is, what are the gotchas? Is there a gotcha out there?
Is there
A gotcha? Is there something, a surprise that the town is going to happen to the town administrator when the town administrator walks in?
you want to?
No, I don't believe so.
No, I don't either.
Okay.
I mean, we have our issues. Every town
Every
does.
community does.
If
I
it-
can tell you a bunch of your issues. I don't.
we haven't found the perfect place yet. If you've done some research on us, you know that financially we're in good shape. Our budget this year, thanks a lot to Todd, is in good shape. The department heads have been very good about that. You have strong leaders in the department head. You met the chief of police, and Todd is an outstanding finance director. So you have good strength there. Our schools are solid. We have issues. We have the growth issue that we have to do. We have the 40B issue, which is here to stay. We have to manage our way through that. Capital is always an issue for us because we don't have the type of revenue that you have to be able to effectively plan longer term. We have a long-term capital plan, but the funding is the hard part. And so we're always working our way through funding issues and frankly probably never have enough to meet the needs of all departments, but we do pretty well. But we're not in the same neighborhood as the ability you have in a NATIC to be able to be more formal in that opportunity. I don't think there are any gotchas, but there will be challenges. I can assure you that, but I think you know that. You've been in the business of challenges your whole career.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So, 2 or 3 things that the board wants the town administrator to tackle immediately?
I don't know that I could single it down to a single issue, or even 1 or 2 issues. I mean, we have issues at 40, the ones I mentioned, 40Bs are a constant issue, getting familiar with those and understanding the issues we're dealing with. We are a rural community and people like it to stay rural. I think we would both call that just under new growth.
Yep.
I mean, we've had more of that than we've ever had before, and we have to manage it as best we can. People have a legal right to do what they have a legal right to do within our zoning, and you're right, the law favors the developer in 40B, so we struggle with that. I can't think of any crisis that you're going to have. That's the good news, I guess. Kevin, you?
No, nothing of great urgency. Just, we have been without a permanent town administrator since the end of the year. So there has been a little bit of a gap. We've had some great individuals fill in where they can, especially in the interim. But I think one of the big things will be building that relationship with the community that hasn't necessarily been there over the course of the last few months. That's been kind of absent. So I think that would be a big part of somebody coming in. Again, not unique. I'm sure that's with any position you'd be
Look
in.
forward to that one. There's some great techniques for that.
Yeah, I mean, the timing, I think, is good in the sense that our town meeting is the second week in May, as you know. Great opportunity for people to meet and greet. We do use local cable TV quite frequently here. It's an effective tool. Kevin has done a lot of work in terms of social media and things of that nature that we've probably been a little bit behind on, and he's brought us up to date on. I think the visibility and getting to know the community and working with the department heads and getting your set covered, I think you'll come up with your own priorities, quite frankly.
Okay.
Would be my best guess.
I only had one other question. When is the decision and when is the expectation for a start date?
Well, we're hopeful. I think we're in agreement that we can make that decision tonight.
Okay.
And in terms of start date, well, let me ask you, when would you be available?
I would be available. It's such a tough, I play such a large role in Natick. I would want to give them a minimum of 30 days.
That's the norm. I would expect
that is a minimum. I would actually indicate to them that I would help them out on weekends. After that, I just think that I play with an end date. I mean, I'm willing to help out for a short time, but with an end date. And I'm willing to come here to do whatever I can, nights and weekends. Nights are tough because we're in as I said before, from January through mid-May, we're 3 to 4 nights a week. But I would come here nights and weekends in the interim in that first 30 days. I would expect to spend a lot of time in the town just to get to know, some of the operations. I've visited all of your buildings, and read three years of budgets, 3 years of meeting minutes, and watched several tapes. So I'm pretty familiar with your operations. But I would, 30 days, I think is.
Well, that speaks well to you, that you would want to make sure that you leave Natick under the right terms, so that speaks well to you. Kevin, any final thoughts?
No, just thank you very much for coming in. Really appreciate
Very
it.
nice to meet you.
Same here. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Good
Nice
luck,
to see you.
even if it's not me. I
Oh,
certainly
wow.
hope it is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Same here.
Well, we're close to on time.
Yeah.
Are we having problems with the microphones? Are we not doing very well?
Problem is,
That we lean back?
it's not bad, it's just not quite as loud as Katie would like it. And I think the problem is that normally when you speak.
Yeah, I know.
this
I
way,
know, and we're
you're
facing that way,
way.
yeah.
So I'm gonna move this over this way. so-
Okay.
Okay.
Whatever we can do to help. Do you want to take a 5-minute break, or?
Sure.
Okay. We'll do that. Mrs. Gleason, we're going to just take a 5-minute break. Mike, a pleasure. Jim Lehan.
Jim, nice to meet you.
meet
Mike.
you as well, sir. Mike, nice to see you.
Kevin Calcutt.
Kevin, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Todd is our finance director. Yeah,
Very important person.
yeah, very important person. Susan, also a very important person, executive director, executive assistant, I should say. You may have met Scott, okay?
Chief,
And you've met the chief, I know.
have I met you?
No.
Good luck. Thank you. You were on the panel, right? All right.
Please, join us.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Nice to have you here. So, well, why don't we start off by giving you a chance to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you all for the opportunity to be here. And thank you for giving me a chance to compete for this position. I do believe I would make a well-qualified, strong candidate for this position. And I want to tell you about myself. And as you have my resume, I think I'd like to explain a few minutes about my military career, because I think that makes up a good 30-year block of my experience, and then I'll cover what I'm currently doing right now in the city of Providence. First of all, I'm a passionate, lifelong public servant. I believe and truly believe to this day there's no greater calling than to be in the service of your fellow man. And it's something I have done all my life. I've had nothing else. This is my dream job. I'm doing it every day, and I'm glad to do it. I would start off by telling you that the Army is a family business for me. I'm the son of a soldier. I'm the brother of a soldier. I'm the nephew of a soldier, and very soon to be the father of a soldier. My youngest, 18 years old, he'll enter into the ROTC commissioning program this month, so he'll be off to it. And as you can gather from that, I served nearly 30 years in the United States Army as a field artillery officer. I had a number of assignments across the globe, been deployed all over the world, and done many things. What I think would be important is if I could highlight a couple jobs for you and how it relates to this position, and just kind of give you an indication of what the things I've done. First, I started off as a very young platoon leader and went to Desert Storm. And after that, I had 2 assignments as a battery commander. I managed and led anywhere from 50 to 150 people, and primarily this was the boots on the ground, day-to-day leadership with young soldiers, and I did that as well. After that, I went into assignments as a major. We call this in the Army the Iron Major days, where you're doing key staff times. That would be equivalent to your deputy directors, your assistant directors, operations officers to that extent, and had a number of assignments doing that, and including in HR, in the Army, Human Resources Department. After that, I was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and selected for Battalion Command. I commanded the 1st Battalion, 17th Field Artillery, and within 5 months of taking that command, we were deployed to Baghdad, Iraq. And I spent the next year in Iraq doing base operations and convoy security. So base operations, I was asked to build, secure, and maintain Camp Stryker adjacent to the Baghdad International Airport, and how this job kind of relates to what the town administrator position. I was the mayor. I was the town mayor. I was responsible for all the utilities. I was responsible for all the housing. I was responsible for all the sewer systems, the electrical systems that we built. We built our own power grid. I built all the roads. And then this Camp Stryker became of strategic importance when General Petraeus decided to do and execute the surge into Iraq to end the Iraq War. This became a key place where I was asked to double the occupancy size of that installation. Basically, it was a mile long and a quarter mile wide, and we were asked to put another 5,000 people into it. So during that time, I commanded around 550 individuals, both men and women, and coalition forces as well. After that deployment, I was selected to then go into a observer controller position and then train my peers before they would go into Afghanistan and Iraq. Their last training event before they would deploy would be inside of the operational area that I worked in, and I worked very closely with them teaching them, coaching them, and mentoring them on the experiences that I had and able to share with them from the experiences I had gained before they would go into the combat zone. Following that assignment, I was promoted to colonel and then selected to attend the United States Naval War College, where I spent a year there getting a master's degree in national security affairs. And then upon graduation, I was selected to command a brigade level command of approximately 3,000 people in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. I spent 15 months in Helmand building infrastructure, working with police forces, training. I built and dug wells. I built barracks. I built roads. I built leach fields, everything that had to do with the and the whole base operations. That's what we focused on, and that was what was my responsibility. I'm very proud to say that in my entire career and all the deployments that I had in the numerous years that I spent overseas, I brought every soldier home. It was not the usual circumstance, and if it's luck, great, I'll take it. But one of the primary things that I set out to accomplish while I was there was to bring everybody home, and I did. So a lot of variety in my career and assignments, but I do think it focuses all on a lot of the things that I did. After I returned from Afghanistan, I was selected to be the Senior Army Advisor again back in Newport to be a professor and then represent the Army at the Naval War College. From there, I was offered another command, and I declined it. And the reason I declined it because I wanted to keep my son in the same high school. Of the 4 children I've had, he's one of the only ones that actually got to go to school for 4 years in one place. We moved frequently throughout this career, but you know, I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and I knew it was time to retire. And then I made the decision, and I faced my very first crisis. I actually had to pick out a wardrobe. Honestly, now it may not seem like a large crisis, but if you consider from my last day in college until March of 2015,
I can know exactly what you're saying.
I had it was an easy choice to make, right? And now all of a sudden I had to figure out what it was. But I was also very lucky that I was able to get an offer from Mayor Alorza in the city of Providence. They had an opening in their emergency management department, and their emergency manager is a full-time employee with a small staff, and I took over that position. While I was there in the emergency management department, we did a couple really unique things. One, in Rhode Island, we were the only emergency management agency that achieved EMAP accreditation, which is the gold standard for emergency management. So we did that. I ran a number of exercises. I updated all the plans and policies and ensured that Providence was prepared for any potential emergency. One of the things that I did and brought forward was I built a large map, probably the same size of this room, that we were able to procure, and we would conduct tabletop exercises on that map. And it really changed the way we had and viewed the way we ran exercises, because now instead of just sitting there and talking about what we were actually moving chess pieces on the map and coordinating and looking at the potential realities and problems that happened there. After that, the mayor called me one day and he said, "I'd like you to be the director of public works." Now, in my experience as a field artilleryman, a lot of heavy equipment, right? So very related field. The one thing that I can tell you is maintenance was a priority throughout my career, because if you didn't fix it, if it didn't work, you were walking. It didn't change the requirement of where you had to be. If you had to walk, that's how you would get there. So maintenance was important. Mm-hmm. But he asked me to take over public works. Public works, I did this job for approximately 3 years, and it was not the full-fledged public works in Providence. The model, it does not have the water department. Providence Water Supply Board operates all the water and does actually water distribution for nearly 60% of the state in there. But I managed the engineering, the traffic engineering, the parking, the sewer, the highway, the bridge, and the environmental aspects of all of public works. I became an expert at snow plowing. in numerous storms. And as a matter of fact, when I first started in Providence, literally in January we had the 24-inch blizzard snowstorm, and that was the year of Snowmageddon, when every other weekend it was snowing. So it worked out. I figured had I done that before? No, but it was something that it was about leading people. About 6 months ago, the mayor called me again. And my response to him every time he called is, "Where do you need me to go?" And he asked me to take over public property. And public property includes the capital improvement program for the city. Now, I'd been working with the capital improvement program with the city in the public works aspects, but with the departure of the latest operations officer, I then assumed the entire capital improvement program. When I went into public property, the mayor expanded my responsibilities once again. I now took over all school construction and began to organize the entire city's capital improvement program for all facilities and in all school facilities. So I'm managing right now a number of projects that are in excess of $370 million. There's a lot of work to be done in Providence, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to do that. A little bit about me and my current job is that I manage over 90 facilities. I also manage the city's fleet, and I'm responsible for the city's procurement process. I sit on the Board of Contract and Supply, and I also sit on the School Building Committee. A little more personal about me, I'm a novice beekeeper, and I'm trying to, expand that, and I do wear the suit. I'm not one of those individuals that will just walk out there and lift up the bees and without the suit on. I am a part-time gardener, and that's something I like to do. I'm a tinkerer. I like to look at things and see how they work. And if it comes to sports, whoever's buying the beer, that's whose team I'm supporting.
There you go.
So if you need somebody on your side, put a beer in my hand. We're good to go.
Well, that works out, because I desperately need somebody on my side here. Thank you.
You just hit a gold mine. We have
So-
a Yankee fan in the room. That might be a little tough for you. That's a two beer.
It depends on the beer. It depends on the beer. So that's in a lengthy but I think appropriate nutshell that describes who I am, what experience I have, what I kind of bring to the table about this job, my passion for public service. I can't think of doing anything else. This is what drives me, and this is where I think I make the greatest impact.
Well, that's first. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you for the support.
Foremost for that. Thank you,
You bet.
and to your family. So, Kevin, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I think as Jim said, as you outlined the time, dedication, and sacrifices associated to the service, heartfelt appreciation. Thank you.
No, thank you again. Thank you for the support.
So it sounds like through the course of your career in city management, you've been presented with new opportunities, new challenges, and new responsibilities pretty much every 2 or 3 years.
That's correct.
Can you talk to me about how you've acclimated to those new responsibilities and how you brought yourself up to speed to be able to be effective?
I think the number one aspect that I bring to the job is a eagerness and willingness to be successful and to understand what problems that are uniquely faced by that particular position that I'm in. We could sit here today and talk about all the different aspects of any job and what goes right. We could then focus on those areas that need improvement. What I understand, and I'm a firm believer in the after-action review, and that a process, right, and bringing a process not to paralyze, but a process to enhance and understand where an organization is at, what its strengths and weaknesses are, and being able to enhance those strengths and then build on those weaknesses and to eventually, hopefully, make them a strength one day. Each job has its unique challenges. Each job has its unique requirements. I was not an engineer when I took over Public Works, but I quickly surrounded myself with key people that understood engineering and how to best get them to advise me on what would be a good decision, what's a bad decision, what are all the factors that have to be considered, what are all the requirements that we're facing, is there laws and ordinances that we have to be concerned with. So it was more about using and understanding the situation and getting the people to bring me up to speed, because I brought an ability to discern good courses of action from bad courses of action, understanding the risks and the pitfalls. I think risk management is one of the things that every good leader should incorporate into any key and critical decision that they make. And having those tools that I had in the military as well as in municipal government, because I found that they've translated very well. And being able to respond to a situation, understand what the implications, look at second and third order effects, and then help that organization chart a path. I think as a leader and as a manager that one of the things that we're obligated to do is provide a vision, right? Outline a goals and objectives that we can bring that organization to. And then doing that constant assessment of, are we achieving those requirements? Are we achieving those goals? And if we're not, why aren't we? And what do we need to do to get back on that path to those goals? And sometimes ask the hard questions. Do we need to change our goals? Do we need to modify the objectives? The truth can and does change. And understanding those realities, there's that impact. In any organization, a leader can impact time, they can impact people, and they can impact resources. And it's being able to leverage all of those to achieve those goals and objectives, I think, is what I bring to any organization and any department. I think that's why my boss asked me to come in and do the things that I've done for these departments.
Very good. Thank you.
Every state is unique in its rules and regulations.
Yes.
And I'm obviously very well versed in Rhode Island, but not so versed in Massachusetts.
That is very true.
How would you get up to speed?
One, depending on the department, there's one, and this kind of leads into some of my leadership traits, right? Always seeking self-improvement, right? And finding all the materials, understanding what all of those potential areas of pitfalls or concerns, rules and regulations, bylaws, and read. I'm a prolific reader. I try to find time to read every day, regardless of my schedule. And honestly, I wish I could do it more. But then also, again, back to what I mentioned previously, connecting with those key department heads and understanding what's important to them. What do they need to make me aware of and for my consideration? So do I know everything about 40B and 40R? No, I don't. And I'm not here trying to tell you that I do. But I know a good idea when I hear one. I know how to find out if it's going to work or not. And I know how to manage risk and understand and estimate the best way and chart a path to go forward, right? I think that there's also a personal and professional means and mode to do this. There's conferences, they're online, there's webinars, finding the subject matter expert and dialing their number, right? Using the connections that I have and figuring out the best way to get all the information I need to help become up to speed. Is it a challenge? Yes. Is it unsurmountable? No. I think that I live in Massachusetts, so I have some awareness of that. But do I know them all at the town level? Absolutely not. But I do possess that drive and determination to achieve that and can become very effective very quickly.
Kelly?
Given the rate and pace of your progression through city government management in Providence, you'll likely be mayor in 8 years. So why Norfolk?
So I lived in Providence for a couple years, and it's a great town. It's got a lot. I wanted to see what it was like to live in a big town. I lived right near the downtown on the east side. Beautiful, wonderful, right near Roger Williams Park. Mm-hmm. Great place. But then I picked to buy a house in Rehoboth, Mass. I am a small town person, right? Many military installations, right, where I lived as a child and as an adult are small towns. I like the fact that I have 1.5 acres of land on the property that I have. I like that open space. I like that community feeling, right? I like being able to go and walk and talk to my neighbors and say hello, see how they're doing, find out what's interesting them, and meeting them. Great personalities on the block that I live in. And In Providence, it wasn't exactly that. It was very similar. But I like that openness. I like where Norfolk is. It's located. You're sandwiched right between two major attractions. You've got major venues and major roads that come right through here. So you've got a lot going for you. I think that this is exactly what I wanted and where I wanted to be.
Very good, thank you.
Finance. Talk to me about your budgeting experience.
Okay, so every job that I've ever had, being second lieutenant or to director of public property and capital improvement for the city of Providence, I've had responsibilities for budget. So I've built budgets and I've managed budgets. From the military aspect, I will tell you it's slightly different though. As our funds were appropriated, I was issued a budget, and it was my job to manage that budget. So there were no revenue aspects of that budget while I was in the military. But there were requirements where we had to develop budgets in order to achieve certain outcomes that we were looking for. And that goes to a process that I will expand on and tell you about. In Providence, I'm at the department level. I'm in the current process of building our submission for FY20. And I've managed it, I've executed it, and what I would tell you, I've learned a great deal from it. The revenue aspect of it became a very interesting portion of it, understanding how that was generated and how that impacted our budgets, and then to having long conversations with the finance director about why we couldn't create a revolving fund just to support some of the things that I would like to have done, and how to work with the general fund, and how to work in general obligation bonds. And I work very closely right now with the director of finance on the city's management of our bonding effort for all of that capital improvement program. I'm very tied to the current debt service and our availability of bonding dollars based on that debt service, and we're figuring out the best way to leverage the dollars that are becoming available in the future. I've actually would tell you that each part of this and the creation of the budget is tied to, and what became important, where I think municipalities, at least the one, my experience thus far is, we've had a disconnect from the vision, where budgeting became a mundane process, where we went in, we looked at the numbers, we did our requisite cuts, we asked for the certain things, and that was it. Where I think budgeting needs to go and move towards is understanding how that connects to the master plan, how that connects to the vision, right? If we're building a budget, and I know 2/3 of your budget approximately goes to the school commitments that you have, and your available reserves are about 20 to 25% of any budget in a given year. That's not a lot. So you have to be very smart about what and where you would spend that money. Is it tied to that vision? Are we advancing the ball? Are we moving towards those objectives and requirements that we've laid out in order to accomplish that? Those are key and critical questions. So often we just turn in the budget. This is what I had last year. I'm going to mark it up for 3%, turn it in this year. I don't know that that works. It's one thing to say that a budget accomplishes, it pays the salaries, it plows the streets, it pays the light bill. But when you take all of those other factors that you have to do, that you have to be able to say, are we moving towards the goals that we set out to do? If the answer is no, we need to make an adjustment. Are we looking at asset management? So one of the concerns that I have in Rehoboth, as a result of this entire process, I began now to look at my own town. And I was somewhat dismayed when I read online that they're looking at 2.5% property tax increase for the foreseeable future. And they outlined the reasons as schools and then decaying facilities. I question, and even in the city of Providence, are we doing sufficient as we manage these budgets and requesting to our assets? Are we forecasting in the future the useful life, A boiler has a certain life. A roof has a certain life. A vehicle has a certain life. Are we now programming funds to replace those? Or are we looking at one-time adds of borrowing? Or are we looking at, one-time impacts on our operational budget? I don't think that's exactly the way I would do it. And what I would propose is that we look at budgets as requirements, and are we meeting those goals and objectives? And if not, do we need to change those goals and objectives if they're not accurate anymore? And are we trying to get to that place where we need to be? I think you also have to think holistically. I think that every budget that has is linked to operations, but it has to also deliver movement, progress, and you have to protect your bond rating. You have to be financially stable, or you're going to end up putting a letter on your website telling your residents you're going to be raising taxes for the foreseeable future.
Well, you hit my hot button, which is financial stability and bond rating, because that's the business I've come from, so we speak the same language there. And by the way, our reserves are very healthy for a town our size, and our bond rating is among the best in the state for a town our
Yes,
size.
sir, I know. I
We've
looked
done
it up.
We've done some work there. Kevin, I'm sorry, your turn.
Oh, that was my turn. You skip around. So previously we had talked, or you had talked about economic development as one of the facets of
Yep.
City management. As you transition that kind of foresight into a smaller municipality like this, what are your thoughts or directions on some of the actions you would take to help develop our economic environment?
What I would say, I look at economic development with three pillars, right? Supporting business, supporting workers, and then supporting the quality of life. Quality of life going back to the culture and the character of the town, right? Supporting the businesses, not only new businesses that you would potentially attract, right, but also the existing businesses that you currently have in place. Understanding what their needs and their requirements are, right? Also for the workers. The demographics here in Norfolk are present, maybe you'll bring in other workers as needed, but what are those skills that are required? Are there opportunities for the folks that do live here? And I think going back and thinking holistically to this, and I can give you an example of something that I'm currently working on in conjunction with the planning board. As the director of public property, we've had a VFW hall that a single member was the proprietor of that hall, and he passed away. And he then deeded the property to the city. A part of that was a small restaurant called Sue's African Restaurant. Now, I, representing the city, have taken ownership of that facility. We're now looking at a small startup that is interested in procuring the property, and then I asked that could we maintain and sustain that restaurant and her need in there, because the building's not up to code. The building has, a number of problems. But we're working with this firm that are two former RISD students, the Rhode Island School of Design, and they've got their small design build company, and they're looking at sustainable technologies, right? And they want to build maker spaces. They want to bring in the local high school that's across the street, and then divide the space up and make the best of it. So we're looking for opportunities like that in Providence to expand on those blighted properties, rundown buildings. You don't necessarily have those problems, but what I'm giving an example is of something that where we're looking at a problem and how we would apply what we're doing. We may be looking at how to build the city village more. Southwoods, the hospital and the property there. Here's another example. I gave a tour to a senior group of an abandoned elementary school. Providence has a couple of schools that are no longer in use. The facilities they were so large, they were built for 1,000 elementary kids. It's a huge parcel, and we couldn't upkeep that building any longer. And we moved all the kids out of it, and schools went more smaller and local, and this large facility just sits in the community. We gave a tour to a group of seniors that are looking for a senior co-op. So we walked through the cellar, we walked through every classroom, the cafeteria, the auditorium, and they were laying out their vision of this can be the community space. We would put the pool here, right? And creating that opportunities for affordable housing for those seniors in that community to be able to do it. It would take a significant amount of investment, but the opportunity's there. That's another example of how we're looking to develop that space. Again, maybe not the exact same footprint or requirements that you have here, but probably very similar to your hospital site that you have that's of concern. One other area that we're working on right now in public space and public right-of-way is how to develop more foot traffic. The automobile reigns supreme in Providence, and we're looking at ways of how we can now build out downtown, make it more walkable and bike-friendly. So that in itself brings additional economic success to the city as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
This may seem like a strange question with someone with your many years of military background, but I think it's one that I would be interested in hearing how you would relate to it. Tell me a little bit about your management style, how you'd interact with. Now, we are a small town.
Yep.
We have excellent department heads, but your relationship and how you work with, mentor, and develop, or even recommend change, if you will, to department heads is critical to a small town success. Talk to
Absolutely.
me about how you do that.
All right, so I'm a subscriber that there is a difference between leadership and management, right? But the two do converge, right? And that leaders lead people, and then they manage resources as well. I'm a lead by example kind of person. I'm a muddy boots. I'm out in the trenches. During snow, I was out on the roads in the plow trucks, right? They wouldn't let me plow. That was a union agreement. but I did ask, right? Because I wanted to operate all the equipment. And I subscribe to a philosophy of empowering your subordinates, right? And that as a leader and a manager, one of our key tenets is to give guidance and intent, because I believe that people are our most precious resource, that they have the ability to do great things. And sometimes if you get that dominant, overbearing, authoritarian, even in the military, that doesn't work. You know, I still had to deal with young privates, right? 18, 19-year-old young men and women, right? And they saw the world very different than I did. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. But when I looked at department heads now, when I looked at the subordinates that were under me, I wanted to empower them to be able to make decisions, right? I want to underwrite their mistakes when they make honest mistakes that we can learn from. I'm a very open and accessible person, very approachable. I met a couple of the folks that you had here, Betsy. She and I had a great conversation about what's great about this town. And I really enjoyed that she took the time, and she was very friendly, and I think that reflects the character of your employees, right, and this town. I'm not a yes man, right? I will tell you what I think. And I was the only director in the city of Providence to actually publish an open door policy, because I firmly believe in that and being accessible. The HR director thought I was crazy. Didn't know why I did it. Even heard that some of the union leadership said, don't use it. I still had employees, both bargaining unit and non-bargaining unit, come in and use that open door policy. Sometimes it was just to talk and pick my brain and see what was going on. And I used the same opportunity to take the pulse of the organization. So I think that's important. I believe that a good leader must also be a good follower. That if you're not and don't understand what it is to be a follower, you would probably never really appreciate what it is to be a good leader. I believe that Coach K one time told us some very good advice in a briefing to a bunch of Army officers. He asked us the following question. If you had Michael Jordan, and this is, of course, dating myself, or LeBron James today, right? That one superstar, is that better than 5 other players that were average? And his response was this. He said, 5 players that play as one will always be better than that one superstar. Always. And I believe in it. I'm a team builder. I want to capitalize on the strength of the employees and the leaders that we have here to make sure that I can resource them with time, people, and other resources. And then understand what motivates them. People are driven by their motivations. And what I found is that once you understand that, you're going to get along great. And that if we have that open dialogue and communication, which I think communication is one of the core tenets that every leader and manager must have. Because if you can't communicate, you may be very good, but you're all by yourself. So being able to communicate and having that, right? I also subscribe to something I put together called my 10 plus 1 rules, because nobody likes 11, so I said it was 10 plus 1 rule. And I'll just give you a quick rundown of that. The first one, and I won't tell all of them, but the first one is the importance of saying thank you. There may be a clerk I know I had that's working diligently and doing his or her job over there. And what would it be to take and go and say thank you? Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for doing your job very well. Thank you is the simplest token of respect that we all have, and it acknowledges the work that people do. I believe in saying thank you to people and letting them know that they're appreciated and what they do is important. The other one that I would tell you is, in just like Rule 5, it's if you don't like your circumstances, change your attitude, right? Your attitude, and I don't know if this is accurate anymore, but when I wrote it originally, your attitude is the one thing you get to pick every morning. But now I have to pick my clothes out too. But your attitude really does reflect a lot about how you feel. It could be the worst day ever. You could be getting, 100 complaints, 100 311 requests that plowing wasn't done, the facility has a roof leak, whatever it is. But the one thing you have is your attitude. And people are watching you. As a leader, they are watching what you do. So if you can't change your circumstances, pick the right attitude. I'm a positive person. I'm energetic. I'm passionate. This is a good opportunity that I kind of outline the first 90 days if you select me to do.
My next question.
Very good, sir. One, I would meet with on day one with the selectmen and understand what's important to them. Right? What are their priorities and what's important? There is a difference between what's important and what are the priorities. Do those two match up? Where does the vision of the town need to go? Where is it at now? What's their assessment? So understanding what the selectmen, who represent the collective decision-making body of the town, and understanding where they go. The next thing I would do is I would schedule a complete budget briefing to me to understand where the budget is at. You're probably in the process of developing your budget for FY20 now. I'd like to see where all the allocations are. What are the revenues? Tell me about what the plan is. Is the budget tied to the vision and the plan? Right? Do departments have plans? Then I would want to meet everybody that I possibly could. I want to shake their hand. I want to say hello. I want to introduce them myself. I want to let them know that if they need to talk to me about anything, my door is open. I want to know what's important to them, what motivates them, how they get to work every day. Are there any issues or problems that we need to be concerned? How can we help them live? I believe, again, mission first, people always. Then, after that, I would go to each department. I want to kick tires. I want to see the equipment. I want to touch every piece of equipment that we have. I want to see the terrain. I want to know and understand everything about the community. What makes it what it is today? And you can't do that by sitting in an office. You've got to be up front, out front. Sometimes you've got to lead from the front. Smart leaders know when to lead from behind and helping out others, right? I'm interested in the success of every employee here. I want to know what makes them tick. What's important to them is important to me. What's important to you is making sure I achieve everything that you set out for this town to do. And finally, I would meet all the businesses that I could possibly meet, say hello, have lunch, grab a beer, and at the end of that 90 days, come back to you, the selectmen, and debrief you on what I found and what I see, and give you my recommendations on a path forward. Are we tied to the plan? What's working, what's not? Do I want to change things? Absolutely not. Sometimes I think that you have to have the willpower and the courage to continue on the path that you're on, if it's the right thing to do. At the same time, you have to have the willpower and courage to change it if it needs to be changed. Change can be disruptive at times, but everything changes. And it's how you change, how you embrace change. Another part of this is turn the ship 1 degree at a time. If you turn it 90 degrees, everybody's going to get mad. Absolutely, guaranteed. When you turn it 1 degree at a time, you won't know that you've done a 90-degree turn eventually. And with the input from every employee here, they will be the ones turning the ship. That's what I would do in the first 90 days.
Okay, Kevin?
As a half-decade resident of Providence while I was in college, I had many an interaction with the Parking Administration Department, which I see here falls under your area of responsibility with Public Works.
You do have courage.
Yeah.
I, sir, can wax eloquent about parking in Providence, so I welcome the opportunity.
So from that experience, there was many an opportunity to see some resistance every now and again. So maybe you could talk to us about how you managed through resistance in the past, specifically in dealing with the community?
Sure. First of all, I think that one of the areas that I excel in is community engagement. I'm frequently invited to all the ward council monthly meetings, and I have gotten out in front, and I want to share with you my very first meeting that I had. As the Director of Public Works, I was invited to Councilwoman Harris's monthly meeting, and I stood up and I introduced myself, and one of the gentlemen in the crowd stood up and said, "You suck."
Welcome to Providence.
Absolutely. Now, look, I will be honest, and I told the previous panel, I kind of took that personal. But I didn't want to be a part of an organization where that's what they thought. So I worked hard. I worked diligently. I looked at all the issues and concerns that they were at, because they had the passion, right, to get up and tell me that I wasn't actually very good at what I was doing, even though it was really the first week on the job. Mm-hmm. I said, you should have waited till my second week before you told me that. But I went back, and I have never had that comment before. I was at a community meeting last night. There were a number of issues, but I was able to bring good news last night, talking about school funding and repairs, and they were very, very receptive of that. But there have been a number of very polarizing issues that I have had to take part in. One of them would have been snow plowing. My boss established a standard that every street in the city of Providence would be plowed curb to curb within 8 hours after snowfall. That's a very tough thing to do. I had 400 miles of roads to work. You have approximately 70 miles here in the town. That was a very hard task to do. Sometimes we made it, sometimes we didn't. But what I did was I went back and I showed the community my commitment to being able to get those roads cleared within 8 hours. I did tell my boss, this is pretty hard to do once you have more than 12 inches of snow, though. And he understood that. And we began to mitigate that with the public. I frequently tell people, you may not like what I'm about to tell you, and that's okay. But you've asked me to make a decision. I've done my due diligence. I've weighed all the facts. I've looked at all the potential concerns. And we turned around and we made a recommendation, and this is what we're going to do. And we executed. But I would say that if we needed to reevaluate, we did those after actions, and we adjusted. So snow plowing was one of those. I've got a list here of potential things that, sidewalks is another. So I've looked at a couple of the sidewalks that you have, and I think you use primarily asphalt in some of the places. In Providence, we use everything from brick to asphalt to concrete. And one of the big challenges that we have are trees. And one of the polarizing issues that we have with trees is they will uplift the sidewalk, and then the resident will call in and ask that that tree be removed. I have to call the forester, and then the neighbor across the street comes out. we think we're going to cut the tree down and fix the sidewalk. They're opposed to it. The forester then changes his mind and says, nope, we're going to keep the tree. We want to have that certain canopy level within the city. So we have very much a polarizing view of what is. And this is, name any street in Providence where there's a sidewalk. Trees are important. I think trees are great. Sometimes I would be at odds with the forester and say, maybe we should take the long view. We could cut the tree down, plant a new one, and a species that doesn't necessarily root up near the surface and lift up the sidewalk and cause a trip hazard that we would have to pay a claim on against the city. And 40 years from now, they will be singing our praises, that they effectively looked at a problem, came up with a solution. Sure, it might not have been popular at first, but it was the right thing to do. And you got to have sometimes the courage to do that. And sometimes we have the courage to say, well, we can just add and, sand the sidewalk down and make it level and flush and deal with it as it continues to rise in the future. Maybe we could build a bump out. But it's looking at all those potential courses of action and deciding which one's the best one. I have a couple of trees on Benefit Street specifically that take up the entire sidewalk. And people are passionate about trees. I understand that. I may have to build a sidewalk around it. And we'll figure out how to do that. But that's what my commitment is. How do we do that? The other one that was not necessarily a polarizing issue in the community, to an extent, but we undertook the capital improvement plan and we committed $20 million to paving. So I had to develop $20 million does not pave a lot of road. It's probably about 20 miles or so, and depending on how you do it. I had to develop a plan that would improve the pavement condition index for the entire city. So council would say, I need these roads done. And I would come back and counter, well, these are the roads I need to get done. And we'd have that discussion, an understanding of where we wanted the city streets to be. A street that has a dead end and 2 houses on it and a pavement condition index of 40 with a traffic volume of 6 vehicles per day is going to stay that way for the next 10 years. But if I didn't repair some roads, the major thoroughroads, the collectors and the arterial routes throughout the city, we were going to be in real trouble. So it's balancing that, their needs, and understanding what they wanted to accomplish. And true to, they represent the constituents of their wards. I had to balance that with the needs of the city and the entire infrastructure. So the council and I, sometimes we had to figure out how to come to an agreement on which roads would get paved and which not. And then look at, going back to asset management, future tranches of funding and how we would be able to get all the roads and maintain all the roads. So a lot of polarizing issues, a lot of vocal support throughout for one cause or another in the city of Providence. I would imagine it's not too different here. People that are passionate about their communities want to be heard.
Same issue. Different road.
Different road.
Yeah. Kevin, do you have any?
No, I'm good.
What would you like to ask us?
So the question I would ask you is about your reserve cash. What do you think, and where do you see, and what would be the appropriate reason to spend that money?
I got it, Jim. No, I'm just kidding.
Give me 5. He's picking on me. And rightfully so. Thank you. Well, you could ask my finance director the same question, and I would ask him to contribute to this. We have worked very hard to build up our cash reserves. Over the last close to 14 years, we've gone from about 300,000 to just under 2 million. Part of it driven because we want good ratings from S&P to get our bond ratings up. We've been successful at that. I come from that industry, so it's a neighborhood I like to play in.
Yep.
Our budgets are good. We don't overspend. We always get free cash, some more than others, some more years than others. We try not to put one-time revenue into the budget when we can't. Sometimes we've had to, but as a rule, we try to avoid that. So I think, and Todd has done an excellent job in building the budget this year. In fact, we're closer in terms of our gap this year than we have been in several years. And a lot of that has to do with the department heads, some of whom are here, one of whom is here, two of whom are here, have really worked well in trying to build this budget, because we've been without a senior management position here since December 1st. So we've had a lot of good team players, which I think speaks well to the department heads. This is a very personal view. Todd can give his as well. I'm not opposed to spending some, those reserves are there for a reason. You know, they're not there to look at, they're not there to polish up on a given day, but they are there to ensure that we maintain that bond rating. And we as a community are constantly borrowing and rewriting our bonds. And that rating is significant to us. It can save us a ton of money on interest, as you well know. So there's a delicate balance between, you know, and you've got to be sure that your debt is well within the ratio of your revenues and with your reserves, because that's what S&P looks at. So I think that most selectmen, whoever they may be, would not be opposed as long as it didn't violate that fundamental principle, that we didn't risk the financial underpinnings of the community. We have some surrounding towns that have very little reserves. That to me is a very uncomfortable position to be in, not just for bond ratings, but, you know, things happen that you don't anticipate. It's it's the way of life. Whatever you've planned on, plan on more, because it's the way it is. We're currently having to replace a roof on our elementary school. We've known about it. We've planned for it. We've worked with the state to get refunds, reimbursements, and so on, but we're still going to be short, and we're going to have to go to the town within the budget and borrow to make sure we finish it, because we have to do it. We don't have a choice. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I think I'd go along the very lines that you're saying, that, you know, what's the return for that investment, and does it fit the long-term goal? Todd, you want to jump in?
I might be opposed to it. Just kidding.
That's his job, by the way.
So, our current positions are pretty good. Obviously, you know, we can always look for improvement. One of those aspects is we're looking at adding an OPEB trust, which would allow us to start to fund that trust to then offset our OPEB liability, which is a very large liability long-term for us. But I think that's part of the overall vision for the finance department, is to kind of minimize that exposure, keeping in mind that we do need to have a good rating. We just went for bond issuance again, and we have great rating, and I have a couple of ideas to improve our rating. Should we go the next round for bond issuance as well? So yes, it's very important to keep that number there, and obviously if we can add more to it, I'd like to see that happen rather than necessarily spend it unless it's an absolute necessity.
I think the genesis of my question was really concerned with the hospital site and the archdiocese and their position on what they would do to either have the land sold or be relieved of the liability of the contamination that exists there. Mm-hmm. And thinking holistically, how does that then potentially weigh in to 40B, potential for expansion of that site into either other economic development areas, and is that that risk and reward, and understanding. I think that's all what you've clearly stated here.
Well, I think we could probably spend the next. I certainly could spend the next 3 hours telling you about our story on the Southwood Hospital site. We've had several developers take a look at it. We don't control the sale; it is owned by the Archdiocese. We do understand now that there is a party very far along with the Archdiocese in working out a deal.
Good.
Our involvement obviously is it doesn't conform to our zoning. We have, I think, somebody will correct me, but I think we're allowed 8 units. You're on the planning board. I think it's 8 units per acre. It's zoned 55 and over plus commercial. And I think there's some 60 acres somewhere in that
64,
neighborhood.
68, somewhere in there, yeah.
That could be built on. There's a lot of wetlands up there as well. No one really has a firm price. There are 2 major issues with it. One is there are some buildings that are hazardous, extremely hazardous, and they're going to be expensive to clean up. And then we have 2 contamination sites that, while they're not dramatically bad, we're not talking about the Love Canal or something like that, but they have to be fixed. So whoever goes in there is going to have a large investment just to prepare the land to whatever they want to develop. And the proposals we've had to date have all pretty much focused on residential. Combinations of regular standard development versus some conversations around 40Bs. We've had conversations around apartments, which, you know, if you're reaching your 10% apartments,
Right.
we walk, you know, I know sometimes people shudder at the thought, but you get to count them all. So, you know, you make headway quickly when you have apartments. So it's a situation that is it's fluid but moving. And that's a pleasant change because we've had it's been stagnant for some time. But we spent about 3 years, 2.5 years working with a developer trying to come to a deal on it, and it got too complicated. We just spent our life in court. I mean, it just got too complicated. So we backed out of that. The Archdiocese now, I believe, does have a more viable opportunity.
Good.
There've been some preliminary meetings, and they're preliminary, so to elaborate on them wouldn't be fair because they may end up being entirely different than the original conversations, but it is in the works,
Very good.
so.
Gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity.
Not at all.
I'm very
Thank you.
grateful, and just a pleasure to even be here and take part in this. Thank you.
It's been wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
And again, thank you for your contribution and your service to this country. Very, very notable and rewarding.
Thank
We're
you.
grateful. Good to see you, sir. Pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Great to meet you. Thank you.
Nice meeting you, too. Thank you very much.
Another 5-minute break?
Appreciated.
5-minute break?
Did she hear you, Jude?
She did. Nice to see you, Lieutenant. Huh?
I missed breakfast this month. You guys canceled
Well, I know, well, everybody gets scared.
Introduce Blythe Robinson.
Blythe, welcome.
Hi,
Hi, Jim Lehan.
nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you as well.
Kevin Calcutt.
Yes, hi, hello.
Todd Lindmark.
Hi, Todd.
Todd is our
Hi.
finance director. Susan is our executive assistant.
I think she's just on every page on the website, I think.
She is the website. She is the website, yes, yes, she is.
Okay.
We're a small town. Our tech advisors are 10, 12, and 14 years old, so. And in my case, I'm not kidding.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to have you with us, and thanks for joining us. Why don't you take a few minutes and tell us about yourself?
Okay. Grew up in Massachusetts, primarily in Wayland. Always had an interest in local government. I think it comes from my parents had a strong interest in community service, and my mother was on the finance committee in her community for about 10 years. I think she was chairman for most of it. And we would debate at the dinner table whether she thought the DPW director should get a new truck that year or not, and the pros and cons of that. And I just enjoyed that. So off to college I went, and from there straight to graduate school, got my master's in public administration. And I went and got that in Washington, D.C., because I wasn't sure whether I was interested in local government or state or federal, and they're all pretty much right there. Had my first internship in a little small city just outside of Washington called Rockville, and I was hooked. Started in the budget analyst.
It's not small. Rockville's a pretty good sized town.
It is now. It was much smaller then. And started at the bottom doing whatever little jobs interns do, become a budget analyst, and then off to my next community. And married a guy in the business, a city manager and finance director, and followed him to positions in Ohio and to Connecticut, and then back to Massachusetts. I've been a town administrator in Upton. I was the first town manager there for almost 7 years, from 2010 to 2017, and then left there that year and went on to Wellesley. Much bigger community, very different challenges, and I was there until just recently. So that's a very quick trip through my bio. It did take a little bit of time out of working for local government. My husband was with the city of Newton, and when the mayor lost the election, he was separated from that, and we had the opportunity to move overseas and moved to Egypt for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That was a fascinating and different experience that I'm very glad I had in life. Maybe took me off of the career track for a couple of years, but I wouldn't trade the opportunity that and life experiences that it gave me. So that's something a little bit different that I've done in life. But otherwise, I spent my entire career in local government, and I really like it.
Great. Well, it's nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Calcutt.
Okay, so focusing first on the resume, in your last position with Wellesley, could you talk to us a little bit how the structure there differs from what we have here in Norfolk?
Very different. They are the only one in the state that has the form of government that they do. My position was executive director, working directly for a 5-member board of selectmen, and the only departments that position supervised were finance, facilities, which was combined town and school, similar to what you do here, and information technology. The police and fire report directly to the selectmen, and all the other departments of the town were through separately elected boards. So library, recreation, public works, council on aging, board of health, I can keep going, but all those others worked, those staff were hired and reported directly to those boards. So, it's important that the position managed the budget and put the budget together, but it was challenging in that those independent boards felt that their budgets shouldn't be changed at all by the selectmen. It was challenging to put a budget together when you needed to balance it. Even Wellesley has, doesn't have unending amounts of dollars available to them, and you had to find a way to get consensus to maybe make some adjustments to get it to balance. So our office focused more on development projects, leading the team on a number of 40Bs. We had 8 40B projects come in a space of about a year. We had, unlike you, the town had not put together a housing production plan, so we had to stop and do that. And also looking at ways that we could reutilize some town land to facilitate the type of development that we wanted to have. So spent more of my time, if it wasn't finance related, it was in various development types of projects and making sure that we are leading the Selectmen's goals, trying to get those accomplished.
Why Norfolk?
Because while I enjoy the opportunities that a town like Wellesley gives you with the resources it has and the types of things it wants to accomplish, I miss a smaller community. I miss being able to be more involved in all the departments. And this is going to sound corny, but I really like public works. I always have. I've been the director. I had to be the director twice in Upton when we didn't have one when I got there and one left in just before the winter of 15 with a really horrible one we had recently. And Wellesley didn't offer that. Public Works was run by a separately elected board, and thank you very much, they didn't want or need any help. So I really missed the team environment of a smaller community. I miss being able to be more involved with residents, and no one really knows what the executive director is in Wellesley. They think there might be a mayor or a town manager, but they never call that office because they don't know who that person is. And so I didn't get the chance to work with people. I mean, that's why I got into this business, and that's important to me, and I'd rather go back to a community that is of a size and of a makeup that allows me to work directly with those departments, build that team, work with residents, and help the community go where it wants to go to. I don't think my role is here to tell the town what to do. It's more to understand what it wants to do and figure out how we can accomplish that. So I'm looking forward to coming to Norfolk because I think it offers all those things.
After hours.
Okay.
That wasn't the bell. We're not dismissing.
I'm like, is there an emergency?
Not yet.
Okay.
The night is young.
All right.
So you did mention that you have some pretty good experience in development projects, specifically around 40B.
Yes.
You had said that the situation you were managing through over in Wellesley there was no housing plan to kind of lean on for that.
There wasn't, no.
That direction. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit how you were managing those kind of interactions, those kind of projects, the community involvement, their perspective, all those different fun things
Sure.
that contribute.
We needed to manage them in a couple of different ways. Number one, pulling the team together to do the best job we could in sending the letter back to Mass Housing to say to them, these are our concerns about this project. I mean, it's unfortunate that that doesn't play as much of a difference as we'd like it to in getting a project maybe not changed and made more acceptable for the community or the situation. But it's still important to make sure that we put our best foot forward. And in one case, we were actually able to get Mass Housing to reject the project, which we were pretty impressed.
That's pretty rare.
Yeah, it is pretty rare. But the other side of it is involving the community. We really worked hard to make sure that we were at that first site visit and interacting with the state, but also inviting all the residents, putting all of the information on our website, making sure that we reached out to everyone, kept them abreast of the draft letter we were going to send, getting people's comments, inviting them to come in and see us, or just sitting down with people and helping them understand, because their world, whatever it is, what they do in life doesn't include knowing anything about 40Bs, and suddenly this project that could significantly impact their neighborhood, it's scary. And so helping them one-on-one or together, just sitting down and meeting with them and helping them understand it. And then working through the process, some of them you could try to approach in a more friendly way. When we got permitted, the first one of those 8 included sitting down with the developer and saying, hey, you know, we're really concerned about the setback in this area to this, you know, these other homes. You know, can we work on this? Can we talk about the mix of housing? You know, because you can't make the project uneconomical, but maybe you can make it a little better, and make it a better fit for the community. In one case, we actually took one of the properties by eminent domain, not something every community can do, but it abutted one of our elementary schools that we were looking to replace. And so that access was going to give us a better opportunity to use that parcel for our own needs later on. So we met with the developer and said we'd like to take it, and we did. So lots of different approaches. And then in some cases, we were very fortunate, or Wellesley's fortunate, because if you're familiar with the Wellesley Office Park, right off of Route 9 and 128,
Yep.
John Hancock wants to come in there and build do a 40R project, which was going to give the town all of the units that it needs to get to 10%, which doesn't happen to every community every day, I realize. But it gave us the opportunity to go back to the other developers who had 40Bs in town and sit down and talk with them about figuring out a zoning change that would make the number of units they wanted to build more palatable for the neighborhood and the traffic issues that we had. So I think you have to look at each one individually, and you have to think about, you know, first of all, you want to get to 10% in a reasonable amount of time, or get to safe harbor, because you know, then you're in a better position to react to further development that comes along. But having said that, I think you have to sit down with your planning staff and think about each one, and are there ways we can approach these and find work something out with the developer that might work to the town's advantage. So it's hard to answer any specifics in your case, but those are the sorts of ways we approach projects there.
Taking us through the proactive mitigation methods as well through once they're in place, that was perfect. Thank you.
Yep, great, thanks.
I know by your resume you have a great finance background, so which is my pet area, but so I won't drill down on that too much, because your background, I think, answers a lot of those questions.
Okay.
I'm more interested in your project management skills. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's quite a long list. When I first got to Upton, the Selectmen had been stymied by being able to finish. Before I was the town manager, they really ran the town. They had administrative assistants, so they had no ability to make any decisions unless at least two of them, like you were together. So they hadn't been able to get their new well field online. There were issues with that. They hadn't been able to move forward to get the town hall renovated. It was 130 odd years old and in very tough shape. And so they said to me, okay, besides getting up to speed and taking over management of all these departments, we need these two major projects done. The water project was interesting because in one situation, there were two issues with it. The first was that the initial well tests showed high iron and manganese levels, which was going to require full treatment by DEP, which we, in a small town, I'm sure I don't need to tell you, very expensive, really don't want to do that. So we sat down with our consulting engineers, and they said, look, if you can find the money to do some additional testing, we think that those tests will come back well, and we think we can convince DEP to let us maybe design for treatment someday if we need to, but to go forward without full treatment. And we were able to achieve that. And then the original plan to run about a mile of water line down to this new field, it had been put together by my person who was sort of acting as my predecessor. And it interestingly went down the road and then past where the well field was and up what was going to be a new roadway into a subdivision. Well, that's what that developer wanted, because then the water was going to go straight through, and that was great for him.
Right.
So there was no public works director when I arrived at the time. They hadn't been able to afford to rehire one, and so we had a part-time consultant. He and I sat down and we said, this is expensive. Water main to install is not cheap per foot. And we looked at it and said, well, gee, if we could go cross-country this way and we could negotiate with the owners of 2 parcels we have to cross to get to where the well field was, because they had bought the land for that. We can cut the price of this, and so we worked that out, and we were able to build it for cheaper, got it online, and the town now has 3 well fields. I think you have 4 and you're going to 5, if I recall?
Well, we have multiple wells, but there's 3 sites.
Okay. The other project was the town hall, and we needed to take that through design and figure out how to get that done. We primarily financed it with CPA funds, but the hard part was where we were going to move to, because it was so significant. We had to dig the ground floor 3 feet down below where it was in order to get all the offices in that we wanted. And so we had to figure out where we're going to go. And in Upton, we have very little office space, really none to speak of. So we went to the regional school district, went to the superintendent and said, hey, do you have any room at the elementary school? Because there's one we have a regional school district there. There's one elementary in our town and one in Mendon next door. And he said, actually, we could work that out. We have this area we could move offices out of, and we could create a separate entrance for you and enough space for us to operate for 15 months. And met with the principal and figured out where we'd park everybody and all the details. And I was at an MMA meeting just after that, and the Sandy Hook shooting happened. And all of a sudden, my phone, I had an old BlackBerry at the time, and all of a sudden, it would light up whenever someone sent me an email, and it lit all day. It just bounced on the table, because it was residents who were just shocked that we would think about moving town hall into a school after something like that had happened. So we had to stop what we were doing, redirect, and we actually had originally tried to go and rent part of the closed Catholic church from the diocese. They didn't want to rent it, they wanted to sell it. So we had to regroup, went back to them and said, we really need your help. You haven't been able to sell it, can you help us? We ended up working that out. The school committee said, we would love to help you, but we just can't. We can't do this. It's too difficult for the community. We moved out. 15 months later, we moved back in. We brought it in on time, on budget. So those are 2 recent examples, but I can give you more.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
So clearly you have a wealth of experience as it pertains to the management of a diverse group of departments and leaders. Talk to us about your management style and what you've seen work over the years.
I like to build a team. I like to include everybody on the team. When I got to Upton, there hadn't been a management team. And so I thought about it and I said, okay, well, I know who my department heads are that report to me, but that doesn't feel like the right approach. So I invited the library director, I invited the elected town clerk, I invited the treasurer collector to be part of the team. And that really made a difference. People want to be included. They want to know what's going on. And I said, look, I'm not going to ask a lot of you. We're going to meet every other week or so, but I want to know what's going on in your departments. I want to know what your concerns are, and I want everyone to be working together on these things, because in that community, we were smaller than you are here, and we had less resources than you do, and it was just a little bit harder to get the things done that we needed to do. But when it came time to figure out everybody packing up their offices to move out, it made a difference that everyone felt that they were part of the team. So when I first get to start to work with people, I like to dive in and get to know them and get to know their department, and spend time with them, go out, as I said, to the selection committee on Saturday, take myself off to things that they're doing. I went to taser training for the police. I didn't actually get tased. Chief offered me an opportunity, but I didn't take it there. Going out on a call with the fire chief just to see what an accident scene was, as long as I wasn't going to get in the way. Going out with a snowplow truck, for not just an hour but for the night. Learning what that's about, and making sure they understand that I understand what their issues are, so that when we have to make tough decisions like cutting the budget, I'm not just doing it from a perspective of sitting in the corner office and trying to just make numbers work on a piece of paper, that I know what it means to them, and we can have a good back and forth about their concerns and what it means to the services they provide, the community that we're serving. I'm a very detail-oriented person. I want to make sure that I know that their numbers are accurate and the work that they do is of the quality you expect. And once I've developed that relationship with them, I like to let them do their work. I don't like to micromanage. I say to them, I can if we need me to. I don't want to do that. I'm sure you don't want me to do that. Once I know that I understand what their issues are and their concerns and what they do every day, I'm happy to have them do it and then meet with them as often. Some people I would meet with once a week or so if that was beneficial. Others call me if you need something. And I think you have to find the right balance for each person because everyone's different. But at the end of the day, we also have a team that works together. And that's worked well for me.
Good, thank you.
Let's go back to Upton for
Sure.
a sec, which is a job more similar to
Yes.
where we are, but different circumstances. What were some of the challenges, not specifically relating to DPW or projects per se, but more interpersonal challenges that you had in Upton, that you had to work through? Whether it be inefficiencies, department heads, public relations, any of those types of issues?
We didn't always do the best job at letting people know what we were doing. We had to, I think, people are so busy, our residents are so busy in their own lives that they just trust that we're doing what we need to do. And they should have that opportunity. By the same token, so I think it's important and incumbent upon us to do a better job of helping them know what we're doing, and it's hard sometimes when you're so busy with all the things that we do every day to take the time to make sure that the website's up to date, that you're pushing out information so that residents can be aware. And it's important sometimes so that they know what the challenges are. One of the challenges we had there was that while we had 2 ambulances, we weren't offering paramedic level service. They were billing it themselves when I got there. That was horribly inefficient, and we weren't bringing in the revenue we should. And so we had to sit down with the finance committee and the personnel board and explain to them that we thought this was important and try to sell them on a plan to make that happen. FinCom was understandably concerned about making the jump of hiring more people, more expensive people, the equipment that needs to go on an ambulance that you may not already have, and trying to put that plan together. We sat down, we showed them the metrics, we showed them the numbers, we showed them how we could make that happen, and we worked it out. And we were able to get that level of service implemented, for the community. Similar situations where the Board of Health has a town nurse, and they had 20 hours a week. That person wanted to work more, we couldn't afford it. And I said, well, we've got to think about a different way to do this. And I said, would you be open to sharing her with another community? If we can sell her hours to another community, part-time for them, at a cost that helps us recoup some of ours, we can keep her because she's great. You really want to keep her. You think that that's valuable. And this is a way we can do this, but you have to be willing to, figure out a schedule that's flexible for her. And, again, sat down and worked that through and developed that relationship so that they felt comfortable with it. And I stayed involved enough to make sure that it was working well, and the other community was happy with what they were receiving. And now I think she's working for 2 different communities besides ours. So those are 2 examples.
May I have a follow-up question?
Go
on
right
that?
ahead.
Thank you. You may know or may not know that we're in the process of opening a new police station,
Yes,
working on a fire station.
yes.
But part of that police station is a new regional dispatch facility,
I'm impressed.
which we're excited about it, and it involves 4 towns.
Great.
Norfolk, Rentham, Plainville, and Franklin. And it took us, Chief may catch me on the number of years, but I'm going to say it took us 4, maybe 5 years from the conversation point to getting all of the towns sort
Sure.
of reasonably close to doing this, because small towns tend to be turfy. Mm-hmm. And we overcame it. 10 years, okay. Well, 5 years of meaningful, 5 years of less meaningful, however one looks at it. But we did get there, and it's going to be a
Congratulations.
great benefit to the communities that it services. But that brings up the question of regionalization, and where are our opportunities? We are in a regional school district, but it's 7 through 12, and each town has its own elementary system. How do you feel about finding different ways to combine services, whether, and I'm not so much focusing on the schools, but in other areas? Do you have any feelings or?
I have strong feelings about it. I am a huge advocate of it. As I said to the selection committee on Saturday, we didn't set out in Upton to be providing services to others. We figured we were the small community surrounded by the bigger ones. We would buy things from them. I think it starts with developing those relationships with your neighbors, and that can take some time, so that there's a trust level. There wasn't, the Mendon Upton School District has been in place for probably 55 years, but it hasn't always had a good relationship because both communities don't see it the same. And so if I had gone in and suggested that we do something with Mendon, I probably would have encountered resistance for that. But having said that, we took the approach that maybe there are opportunities around us. And so, as I mentioned to the committee on Saturday, we started providing dispatch services for Hopedale. They had given up their PSAP when they'd gone to Mendon, and then decided to leave Mendon and needed to go somewhere else because they couldn't get it back from the state. We sat down with them and said, here's how we can work this out together, and they're still doing it today. We sold services to share the nurse with 2 other communities, and the last example I had was that we needed to hire a new conservation agent. It was hard to find someone part-time to get the quality of person we wanted, so we worked with Northbridge, and they bought 8 hours of time. We were able to hire a full-time person, give that person benefits, and share them between the 2 communities. So I think it's something to definitely explore, whether we're able to provide to another community or us to them. Sometimes it's a little bit of incentive for the department head to ask them to do a little bit more work if they're doing it for 2 communities. When I was in Connecticut, we shared in Avon, we shared an assessor with a town next door. The assessor didn't need to be full-time in our community, and the other community being a little smaller. He could do both, and we paid him a little bit more to do that, but on the whole, for the 2 communities, it was less expensive. So Wellesley didn't choose to take that route. They preferred to do things themselves. That's okay. But
Yeah, we've had some, we had a member of of our advisory board who was your town treasurer.
Yes,
You-
Mark.
Mark. And we always used to have some at the advisory board. Mark always brought up Wellesley, and we all sat there and said, that is a very different town.
Yes, it is a very different town.
Kevin?
Earlier in the interview, you identified that in your role as executive director, that many people in town didn't even know you were there or how to contact you.
Yep.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that's not going to be the case here.
Good.
There are going to be people who are going to see you as the focal point or the main point of contact for things related to town business.
Yep.
Knowing that, can you talk to me about how you would bridge and build that relationship with the community?
In various ways. It's making sure that, it sounds a little corny about the open door policy. If someone it takes the time to come here, stop what I'm doing, unless it's meeting with you perhaps, and talk with them, find out what's going on with them. Walk around town hall and greet people who've come in to see us for something, whether they came to our office or someone else's office. That's what I liked about Upton. I liked going out and spending time doing things in the community. That was something the selectmen there welcomed, and it would be a conversation I would want to have with you. How out there in the community would you like me to be, or do you prefer to be the face of the community? The selectmen there asked me to march in the Memorial Day Parade with them. Did that. I would take myself off to Board of Health's Hazardous Waste Day, and it's only a morning, and help out, directing people to the right line to drop off their paint. You get to meet a lot of people when you're making sure that they're, staying in line, making sure they're a resident, or just greeting them. And we didn't have a transfer station in Upton. They had given that up years ago, so I wasn't able to really meet people there. Going out to restaurants in town, going to community events, going to different meetings of different boards, and getting around to all of them and making sure that they know who I am and how I can help. And if there's site visits for projects, try to get out to those and get to know people as much as you can. If there are other community events out there, make those once in a while. But I think it's important to understand with you what role you want this person to play.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. I skipped over a lot of the finance, but I wanted just
Okay.
one quick question on that.
Sure.
Have you been involved in capital planning at all?
Very much. I put the first capital plan together in Upton. They'd never had one before. And the finance director, the treasurer, and I and Wellesley worked very closely together to figure out the financing and the timing of projects, so that we could figure out what we could afford to bond in each year, what we were going to pay cash for, and how that all came together. Actually put together a debt policy that Wellesley never had before to put some arms around how much we could afford to spend in every year to get the things done that we needed to do, and make sure that we were meeting those guidelines, but not spending more than the town could afford to, and still be able to meet its operating budget requirements for schools and all the other departments. So done everything from actually put the plan together, go out and take pictures of every truck and build it, to, like I said, figuring out the long-term financing strategy for it. I like that part of the job. I like numbers, I like detail, so.
Kevin?
You talked about personnel management before, and we talked about the community involvement and how you're going to bridge that relationship. Talk to us about transparency and the means of communication that you can use to help get people involved and ensure that they have all the information that they need about certain things that are going on in town.
Are you talking about residents or department heads or?
Residents.
I think we have communities, every size has to do a better job of that. I actually reorganized my office in Wellesley to hire a communications director. It was that important there. I think we have to realize that in today's age, people are so busy that it's incumbent upon us to do our best job to make people aware of what's going on. And so I would use a variety of tools. I think the website needs to be a little more updated, I'm sorry to say. As a candidate, I've spent a lot of time on it. Not every board's minutes are up to date. Some of them not even in the last couple of years. I think we have to get that information up and available to people so they can find it. I think it's worth taking the time to have a Facebook page, and try to coordinate that so that people get used to finding the information about Norfolk, and we get people to join it. I know there's a community page, but you have to be a resident or somehow connected to join it, so I wasn't able to do that. But take the time to share posts and like things and get people, build it so that people realize that this is a good place to go to find things. The website's a good landing place to get information, but you need to help people find it. Tweet. It's not something I've done a lot of, but I think in Wellesley it was hugely important to people really came to rely on the police department. Did a rock star job of helping people understand, where there's an accident, what's going on here, what that noise was over there, and you start to build on those sorts of things. So it's not something a lot of communities, especially smaller ones, have spent time on, but I think we have to realize that people get their information differently these days, and we have to be doing that with them. Little things like, when I sat at my computer and looked at your website, I could see all the pretty pictures. When I used my tablet, I can't see them all. It comes up in a different way because it's not set to be usable on mobile phones and on tablets. That's where people are these days. They don't watch the news, as much. The newspapers can't carry as much of the news as they used to do, so we have to fill that gap as best we can. And so I think in Wellesley, it was really encouraging people to tell us what's going on in your department. Tell us about when the flu shot clinic is. Tell us what's going on with, that street that's going to be repaved. Don't just put it on your website. Let's push that news out and let's get people used to finding out what's going on here, and then inviting them to comment and tell us what they think so we can make it better.
Absolutely.
I got that one.
Well played. Nicely done.
Kevin has been a strong advocate of what you just discussed. So
Yeah.
Can you just tell me an experience you've had? I mean, we are a small town, and
Yep.
as Kevin sort of glibly and correctly stated, you will have visitors. Not all of them will be friendly. It's normal.
Yep, it is.
It's normal. It's not a bad thing. It's just a real thing, if you will. Tell me about an experience where you had that not so good visit.
My first week in Upton, I was visited by a gentleman who was mad that he has a street sweeper, and he was mad that he couldn't get the contract to do the street sweeping for the town. The town didn't have its own street sweeper, and he wanted to know what I was going to do about it. And I took his information. I went and talked to the highway supervisor and said, what's going on with this gentleman? Why hasn't he been able to get this? Well, he explained to me that this sweeper wasn't meeting the requirements of the work, and it often had broken down in the past, and there was a reason. And so I had to get back to him and explain that to him. And he wasn't happy. And I said, look, I'm sorry that you're not happy about that, but, this is what we require. This is why we require it. And, if you're able to, if you get a new machine or you're able to address these issues, you're certainly welcome to bid again. But I think you have to realize that you can't make everybody happy. But I think it's incumbent upon us to help people understand why and take the time to walk them through it, and get them to realize that they're coming to see you matters, and you're not just telling them what they want to hear or not telling them what they want to hear. There's actually a reason behind it. And we continued to have issues, that gentleman, over the years after that, and a couple other things. Tried to engage him when we could, but he didn't want to in some ways. Burying someone in the wrong place at the cemetery, that was a problem. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. That didn't go well. That took a lot of hand-holding to walk that family through the why.
Pretty emotional issue.
Pretty emotional issue, why that had happened and what caused it to happen and what we were going to do about it. Yeah. So I could tell you other horror stories, but that.
I think you've answered the question. Kevin, you have any?
I see that you had noted here of your negotiation of health insurance contracts
Yes.
and union relations. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience?
Lots of experience. I've negotiated union contracts both with an attorney in the room and without. And I start at the very beginning by meeting with department heads and learning what their issues are, putting together a list of potential changes that we might want to contract, figuring out what the town can afford doing some legwork to make sure we understand what the comparables are to the communities around us and where we're at compared to those. And sitting down with the selectmen and making sure I understand what parameters they have. Probably also want to involve the advisory committee in understanding what their, the future looks like and their concerns. But ultimately, we're getting our parameters and our direction from the selectmen. And then sitting down in negotiations, working out ground rules and working through the process. I think it's really important to make sure that once we're done, we think we're done, we've come up with what we think is within those parameters, is costing that out and giving that to you as the board, so you can see exactly what, a 1.5% or 2% increase each year in the COLA is, and what shoe allowance or what or things we're getting back are worth. I was quite surprised in Wellesley that had never been done. They just, I guess, trusted the executive director if he said the contract was within the parameters that it was. But showing you those numbers so that you're comfortable that this contract is what you give us the guidance for. And if we're having trouble, coming back to you and explaining to you why we're having trouble and talk through what some options might be. In Wellesley, we spent a lot of time doing that because they approached health insurance in a unique way. They're part of a joint purchasing group of 10 communities that had gone from copay plans to deductible plans. And so all the towns had to buy into that. Before I arrived, I guess 4 years ago, the town had gotten all of its 11 unions together, town and school, and negotiated health insurance separately from its basic contracts. And so when I was there in these past 2 years, that contract came back up again, and we had to negotiate those changed, very different health insurance plans. So needed to take the selectmen through what those meant and what we hope to achieve, and talk with them about putting some other benefits on the table, because it was a big change for employees to go from a copay plan to a high deductible and a $4,000 deductible, say, for a family, and what that meant, and helping them understand why putting some other small benefits on the table were a worthwhile endeavor, that trying to get employees to buy into this was going to save the town money over time. And in fact, it worked out really well. They expect to turn $1 million back to free cash this year because more people signed on for the less expensive plans than we had hoped for. And in the next 2 years, we think it will continue to get better. So a lot of experience with a small bargaining unit of 10 people to all those 11 unions together represent 1,000 employees.
You reminded me of another question.
Okay.
I was on the review committee for the finance director for our elementary school.
Okay.
For our regional school. And one of the candidates was from Wellesley.
Okay.
And the candidate, we had this conversation around E&D, or free cash, as we call it here in this department, and over there they call it E&D funds. And I don't know if this is true, but the statement was made that they use all of their E&D every year right back into the budget. And I think it was like 1.5% of their budget.
Wow.
How do you, and I know you didn't have oversight over the schools, but how do you view the use of free cash in budgets?
Cautiously. I think that you have to be prepared for bad things that can happen in a community, and years where things are very lean. And so I think it's important to keep that balance at a higher level than maybe some of our residents would be happy with. I mean, I've had residents say to me, wait a second, you're basically you've got this money over here, but you'd like to tax me, to the maximum this year to fund the budget. Why don't you use some of this I've already paid for? And I think it's important to help people understand that there is a balance, that it's not just having a rainy day fund for comfort. It's in Upton, we had an employee in in our fire department get very ill, and we didn't have very much insurance when I got there for what's called 111F claims.
Yep.
If that had been a claim for life, the community was going to be in a very difficult situation to pay about $1 million in medical costs. We changed that insurance pretty soon after that, but those are the sorts of things that can happen. You have to be prepared for. I think also, like any community, you've got debt. You're going to the market every once in a while, and they're going to look for you to have, I think Moody's would like to see us have 15%. That's not typical in most communities, even in Wellesley. But where are you in that, and are you using it cautiously each year? Do you have a plan for it each year, so that you are maintaining levels that are responsible? So I think it's a balance, and each community's approach to it's a little bit different. But my overall approach would be the first word I use, which is cautious and conservative.
Okay. Kevin?
I don't think I have any other questions, to tell you the truth.
What questions do you have for us?
I'm always interested to know why you like being on the board. What motivates you to be selectman in your community? What do you enjoy most about it?
I enjoy the community engagement piece. I enjoy being able to listen to kinds of things that affects people's lives in town and be able to have some kind of impact on that, whether it be minute or whether it be larger. Being able to assist and help people and really realize the potential of the town as a whole.
Okay.
Interesting question to ask me.
Okay.
I've been on the board a long time. Some may say too long. I got involved because I truly care for the town. Whatever skill sets I have, if I can contribute and make it better than when I started, it puts a smile on my face.
Great.
I like helping. I'm a finance guy by trade, so that was one of my hopes, that I could help. We have an excellent finance director who will now make me look like a novice. But it's, to me, just all about giving back. I never had the chance growing up in belonging to a community, because my decision was made for me that I was going to go to private schools.
Okay.
So I never enjoyed or had the pleasure of being part of a community. And I've been in Norfolk now over 30 years, and this is my home. And my grandkids are here, two of my daughters live here, and I love this town. I just love it. And anything I can do to help it or contribute to it, it has its goods and its bads. There are good days and bad days.
Of course.
And you have to be able to withstand that. Some days it's easier than others. But I try. And, I'm not naive enough to understand that it's a transitional process. And every year you're going to have somebody new, pretty much, is a general rule. Not necessarily
Sure.
always true, but, it's a transitional job. But I would hope that everyone that would go into it would be motivated to just do the right thing and help.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to answer it.
Well, sometimes the right thing is hard. I mean,
It can, you can't, I think you said it earlier, you just can't please everybody.
Oh.
And so you just try to do what you think is right. You make sure it's legal, morally and ethically right.
yes.
And, that it serves the best interest of the town, which means frequently you have to sort of divest yourself from your own personal views,
Yes.
because your own personal views may be in contradiction
Yes.
with what serves the best interest of the town.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I got into it.
What do you think of the town's greatest attributes?
The town's what?
Greatest attributes.
I think Norfolk is truly a community. We're a rural community. We're not like Wellesley.
Good.
I lived in Wellesley, by the way, so
So did I.
I'm familiar with it. It has historically been a town that helps people. When things happen, we had a young man that served our nation and was killed. And I'm going to say well over 1,000 people turned out on a rainy, cold, miserable day just on the streets to pay tribute to this young man. And I would say that 950 of them never knew him. Never knew him. That's who we are.
Okay.
And we have our differences. We
Sure.
we have our arguments, and sometimes we get a little entrenched. Debates are healthy, because usually if people are reasonable, you come to the right answer. Collective wisdom is better than individual wisdom every day of the week. So it's a kind community, it's a good community, it's a growing community. We have our challenges, our issues. It's a very involved community. I mean, Kevin has taken the crusade on improving a lot. That's why I was kidding him about all the things that you were talking about, Facebook and things of that nature. You know, that's not my generation, and that's Kevin's generation, and you need that.
Yes.
You know, I still read the Sunday paper. You know, you need both sides of the equation.
Right.
And I think we have that at Norfolk. A lot more good than bad. A lot of people care, but we're getting a lot of new people into town. And, you know, we have a commuter rail. And we have excellent schools. Our finances are good. You should
Yes,
know that.
I do.
So there's a lot of potential, but there are a lot of challenges around it. We're going to need some level-headed thinking and some creative thinking to work our way through it. And if we work together, we'll
Right.
get there.
Right.
If we polarize each other, we'll have a harder time getting there. I hope that does not happen.
I enjoy finding the creative solutions. I think that's been one of the things I enjoyed a lot about Upton. We needed a new, our tower truck was, in fire department, was past its useful life, needed to be replaced. And we couldn't afford a brand-new one, just couldn't. And Chief said, I really want to get a Quint, which is a combination piece. And I said, well, those are pretty expensive, too. He said, well, I'm going to look, you know, would you be willing to consider a used one if I look around? I said, sure, go forth and look. So he did. He came back. He said, I have a great opportunity. I can get this for about $300,000. It's about 10 or so years old, so it's going to give us a number of years of good service. He said, there's just one catch. And I said, well, what? He said, it's blue. I said, no one has a blue fire truck. He said, well, this department in Maryland has one because that's what they do. Their fire trucks are royal blue, about the color of Susan's sweater.
You see it coming.
We bought a blue fire truck.
We bought a black one.
Okay. You know, sometimes you buy the blue fire truck because, you know, it's the right decision for the community. So,
Any other questions?
if you had any other input on the community that you would like to share?
Well, Jim kind of took them all up, so it's difficult for
Okay.
me to throw anything on top of that.
Hate when that happens.
I'll
You
just
got to go first.
It is
Come on
true,
now.
I got the
Come
other one,
on.
that's right.
Come on.
I would reiterate, though, the sense of community here in
Okay.
town. I mean, there are situations and disagreements that go on about
Sure.
many different topics, but the second there's a problem or somebody needs help, you just see the entire community come together to help and assist. So it
That's
really
wonderful.
takes you back to see.
I mean, I'll give you an example. We during one of the storms, we have a neighborhood that has, it's a fairly large neighborhood, but single access. And there was a tree that had gone down and cut all the power and was large enough to really block access in and out of that community. But there was a teenager in that neighborhood that frequently needed medical assistance.
Okay.
And our fire department found a way to literally park an ambulance in there and leave it there during this storm because of the lack of power, so that it would be available if an emergency happened for that student, and they wouldn't have to have the time to get through all of that, and they
Wow.
were able to get out. That's what we do here in Norfolk, and our police and our fire, I mean, it is a collective effort to try and do the right thing for people and to help people. So
Wonderful.
that's who we are.
Thank you. Well, that's why I got into this business, why I'm still doing it, and I would very much like to be considered as your next town
Well, thank you
administrator.
very much.
Thank
It's been a
you.
pleasure.
It has.
It has been a pleasure.
Well, good luck. I hope that you choose me, but if you don't, I know that you'll make the right choice for the community, and best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I haven't been asked that question in a while.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fantastic to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You as well.
Thank you,
Scott?
Did a nice job.
Want to take a break?
Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
10, 15?
10's fine.
10's fine. Scott, could you ask Mrs. Gleason to give us a 10-minute break? Welcome back. We have now completed our interviews, and we've managed to recharge our batteries here briefly with some tonic water and our salsa water and a cup of tea. So now we begin the process. Kevin, you want to follow the process we used last time? Where
Sure.
we just take each candidate one at a time and take turns talking through the strengths and opportunities, as I think we called it.
Absolutely.
Would you like to start?
Sure would. So let's start with Bill. I thought Bill had a great base of experience. I thought that he had some great things to say in terms of initiatives from an economic development standpoint, from an affordable housing standpoint. He made some great points from a financial standpoint. Capital planning in particular I thought was very strong. He seemed to check a lot of boxes on a lot of the individual pieces that would make a successful person in this role, at least from my perspective. I liked his experience working with municipal building projects in particular, and when he was talking about his management style, he seemed to have a very structured approach that I thought was something that could be very effective here.
I would echo everything you said. I think that he probably brings the strongest knowledge base to the table. I don't think there's an area that he hasn't touched in some regard. Natick is a big town, a diversified town. I would agree with your assessments. I'd be hard-pressed to find any flaws in his skill sets as far as his knowledge base and things of that nature. I think he's a very good candidate. In terms of I don't have any, nothing jumps out at me as a concern. You know, I was impressed with all three candidates. I think they all bring a strong base to the table. I think the part we're going to have to but they're different. Each of them brings a uniqueness to the job. And that's kind of where I am with this, is trying to sort through which piece of that fits best for us. And that's probably the hardest part to sort through. I think they can all do the job. I think, Bernie, you brought us three very, very good candidates. And I'm being yelled at for not speaking loud enough. Okay. It's the voice command police department that's back there. And rightfully so, Mrs. Gleason. So that, if are you in a similar place?
I am.
So
I would ask you, though, on Bill in particular, from a financial perspective, do you feel that there was enough direct involvement with the budget building process to be able to build a base of experience that would be able to be transferable into a community like ours?
Well, he's handled some significant budgets,
Yep.
As he cited. Without getting under the covers and taking a deeper look, I didn't have any watch-outs as far as that's concerned, and I have great faith in that we have an outstanding finance director. So, I don't think you're ever going to find a town administrator that has an expertise in every single facet of town government. And, we have a number of strengths that are already in place. He certainly has a good knowledge. His experience and his resume states that he's got a good background in finance.
Yep.
As does Blythe. I think she has an excellent background in finance. Mr. Borg probably, although I'm not even sure I could say that about him either, because in the military and in his roles, budget management was a critical component. It's different, as he pointed out,
Right.
but in some respects, perhaps even more difficult. When you don't get to build it, but you're responsible for creating, you don't get to create it, but you've got to manage it. It's a different deal,
Right.
and it's more difficult. So I think they all have a pretty good finance background. I wouldn't have a concern there. They all have a broad skill set around people. I think two of the candidates were a little bit more outgoing, but they had different personalities. You can see the military.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but there's some good things about that. Everyone thinks it's bad. It's not necessarily at all. I mean, he's very focused on results. He's very focused on management style. Very well organized. All of them, I think, are very well organized. So yeah, I'm comfortable on the finance side. I don't think we can go wrong there.
Okay. If we're moving on to Mr. Borg, from my perspective, his presentation as a whole
was almost to the point of just like taking everybody back. Like he almost took
I-
over
I
the
couldn't
interview.
agree with you
and
more. Yeah.
He was just a force over there, and I
He
was
was.
so impressed
I
with how
was
he
too.
commanded the interview and how he was able to articulate what he wanted to do and organize what he wanted to say.
You got my vote.
Absolutely, just
Yeah.
very impressed on that front. As you had said, more diverse background in that sense, mainly with the military, and then transitioning that into city management as opposed to town management. Many different roles over the course of just the last 6 years. So clearly doing well in those roles enough to be able to have additional responsibility and have those roles expanded. Obviously, along with that, going hand in hand, though, is not the direct experience with some of the things that would fall under the town administrator. Like you had said before, not a strong necessity that you have to be an expert in every single field, as we have a great team of department heads here. But it was something that was, in comparison to the other two candidates, just not there.
Yeah, the only watch out I had, and it's not really, maybe that's not the right way to phrase it, is Rhode Island law and Massachusetts law, and I mentioned it to him. It's not the same.
Right.
So he would have a learning curve in understanding all of the complexity of mass law, but I don't have any doubt that he'd pick it up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a concern at the first day, but perhaps not the fourth day.
Right.
You know, so I don't see that as an issue. But he was very commanding.
Yes.
Yeah, it was hard not to pay attention to him.
Passionate.
Yeah.
Just,
He had a lot of passion.
yeah.
And he's driven to succeed. And I like the way he framed his definition of success, which was basically not him, but the people around him.
Right.
And they all said that, actually. They were all very focused on team. And that's very important, I think, for anyone to be successful, but I think it's especially important in a small town.
Mm-hmm.
So, Blythe. One of the things that was very noticeable to me, and it was while we were somewhat taken back by the commanding presence of Mr. Borg, Blythe was very calm and very even in her response. Her tone, everything about her was very comfortable. Yeah, I think she is a very confident person, and not that the others weren't. Certainly, Mr. Borg is a very confident person, as is Mr. Chenard.
I was going to say, is that because we got the high beams flashed at us right before she got in here, and maybe we were a little desensitized?
Could be. I don't know. Might have been the bell. I have no
Right.
clue. But she also has a very, very broad base of knowledge. I like the fact that she's been a town administrator in a town, while smaller than ours, dealing with a lot of the similar issues that we deal with. And so she has that exposure. I think she, too, would be, I could be very comfortable with that choice. They're all, this is interesting. Your thoughts on Blythe?
Like you had said, I mean, she was very even-keeled the entire interview. There was not a single question or subject matter that we brought up that she didn't seem to have complete command over.
Both voice and body language.
Yep, absolutely. Her responses in terms of different ways to mitigate issues that would be approached to the office were spot on as well. I mean, she seemed to have seen and heard just about everything that one can in this type of position, in her time in these positions. I liked her experience with union negotiation and insurance negotiation in particular.
I did too.
That was good.
I did, and she responded to that exceptionally well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah. So do you have a preference?
I'm torn. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat that in any way, shape, or form.
Makes two of us. Yeah. And it's a good torn.
Yeah.
It's a good torn, and that we have three very, very good candidates. So how do we sort this through? I think we're in agreement that we have our candidate here tonight.
We do, in my opinion, yes.
In mine as well.
Yep.
All right, so we got that one done. Now we got it narrowed down from 3 to 1.
Is there the potential to narrow it from 3 to 2 in your perspective?
We'll start there.
Yeah.
Of course it is. I'm open to anything you want, but I'm in agreement with you. We have our candidate here tonight. I might have, if I were to, I'm going to give you my 2.
Please.
You want me to start it?
Sure.
I would go with Mr. Borg and Ms. Robinson. And I know he's an intriguing man to me. And, but that's a thin distinction, because Mr. Chenard is very capable as well. So it is a very, very narrow distinction.
I think what we're looking at is two very different approaches to the position.
Mhm.
We have one that is a traditional experience base that has seen and heard just about everything that comes along with the role. And I think both Bill and Blythe fit into that type of persona.
Agreed.
And then you have Mr. Borg, who doesn't have the traditional path.
He's an intriguing candidate.
But the sell that he has on his ability to not only manage these processes and these functions from a high level and apply that same methodology that he has seen success with over the years, on top of his ability to learn and to adapt and to grow, while different from these two, I think makes him a very capable
Me too.
candidate and option for us.
I agree with you.
So I think from that perspective, I'd like to see our two be represented in either of these pools. And from that, I would agree that Blythe and Mr. Borg would probably be my two as well.
All right, we're down to two. And you know, I say this in the sense that I think Mr. Chenard could absolutely do the job.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Absolutely.
Yep.
He's an excellent, excellent candidate.
Absolutely.
Well, I think you said it very well. You have two entirely different personalities. Well, maybe personality, styles, maybe
Right.
is a better word.
Yep,
It's
yep.
not personalities, it's styles. This one's gonna be tough. Are you leaning to one or the other? One of us has to go first.
I am balanced right on the line, so please go first.
I'm balanced right on the line, so you please go first.
Okay, so Mr. Borg, he comes with a high-level approach to being able to apply management style and effectiveness measures and ways that he's going to be able to manage it, much in the way that he's managed everything that comes with the city of Providence. Much of what he talked about was theoretical in nature, right?
Agreed.
I've seen this work with DPW, so in theory it'll work with public safety, or in theory it'll work with HR, or the other departments that he'll find under him here.
I agree.
Mrs. Robinson, however, has applied all of these things before. They're tried and true measures that she has seen success with in her municipalities, and they've been applied and they've worked. So while the approaches are very different and the baseline that they come from are very different, I think that's our key differentiator right there. Do we want to go with something that has been a more traditional approach to be applied into a very similar structure? Or are we looking to do something that's a little outside the box? And I don't want to say take a risk, because I don't think that there is a whole lot of risk in that approach, but something that is less conventional in terms of a background and approach to management.
That's well said. I don't, and I'm glad you clarified that, because I don't think there's a risk to
Right.
either of those candidates.
Yep.
I do think that I think you're gonna get different results from the two candidates. And I'm not sure what that results would be, whether it be favorable or unfavorable, because they're so different.
Right.
And trying to figure out how to kick to 51 versus 49. I wish we could call a friend. One of us is going to have to jump over the fence here.
So I don't think it's any secret that you've been involved with municipal government just a skosh longer than I have.
Whether it's effective or not is a different discussion, but
In that experience, though, have you seen a transition between city government and town government
that has either been positive or negative, or do you not feel that that's a deciding factor?
I don't know that I've seen enough experience in that particular area. I do think that, I do think something we have to weigh is the differences between a Rhode Island methodology of business and a Massachusetts methodology of business. But I don't weigh that heavily because I think he's the type of individual that would just, he'll conquer that in a very short
Adapt.
period of
Yep.
time. So he's got a proven track record of being able to do that. So I don't think there's any risk there at all. What I really enjoyed about him, many, many things I might add, but his enthusiasm and his passion is contagious.
Oh, yeah.
And that is who he is. There's no doubt in my mind. He lives that way every day of his life. And he would be a motivating individual in terms of how I think he deals with our issues in our everyday business, if you will. I see that as a plus for him between the two candidates. I think he is dynamic. He presents himself well. He handles himself well. He's a dynamic man. On the other hand, Blythe has a wealth of experience. She's done the job. She has a very comforting demeanor about her. You know, I think she would handle both the easy jobs and the adversarial jobs quite readily. I think they would handle them differently, but both in a positive way. Both excellent candidates. They're just so different.
I will say this, and I don't necessarily think that it's going to be a factor, but if you look at Mike's experience, he's essentially changed scope and role every 2 to 3 years for the last 3 years or so.
I don't know. I mean, at least as he described it, I don't think that was his doing. I think.
Oh, no. Yeah, no. I know that's not his doing, but I wonder, having that kind of variety.
Bored?
I mean, after 4 to 5 years of being in the role, is that something that you would see as a concern? I'm not saying that there's not enough here to keep somebody's attention. There clearly is. But
Well, I don't, he doesn't strike me as the type of individual you could wear down.
mhm.
So I don't think that, I don't have the concern that, I don't know how else to say it, that, just the everyday issues that we deal with, and, some are more pleasant than others. I don't think that will wear him down. He can handle about anything that comes before him, and I think he'll handle it in a very professional way. I see that actually as a plus for him. I think he could really deal with that very well. Who knows what somebody will feel in 5 years, Kevin? I mean, if I had an answer to that, and I don't want to take a guess that isn't based on any other than a gut feeling, which is not really meaningful as to who might have more tenure than the other. I don't know that I could ever answer that. We know it's a transient business. We know that, people come and go for different reasons. I'm not concerned about that.
Okay.
I don't personally see that as a risk on either side. It's just, we hope we keep him for a long time. The intriguing thing about Blythe is that we're a bigger version of Hudson, or not Hudson.
Upton?
Upton, thank you. We're just a larger version of that. The issues and the problems that we deal with are very much what she dealt with. Different scale, different scope, but not unfamiliar. And that experience is helpful. It shortens the learning curve. But I would also say that, and you lived in, I've never lived in a city, but you lived in Providence. City government is, very complex and not easy to manage your way through. I mean, what experience we have in just dealing with the state. I mean, it's not an easy system to work through the minefields on. And he's obviously done very well at that. But that's an interesting question, would the challenge get old? I don't know. I think that's where you were going with it.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. Don't know. He certainly had a diverse background. I don't think we can go wrong with either candidate. We're both reluctant to jump over the fence on this. if you have a preference, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you have a preference, you'll have my support.
Wow, that is the definition of putting me on the spot.
I couldn't have worded it any better if I tried. You want to take another 5-minute break? Just digest it, think about it, and not keep people on TV waiting in suspense?
Yeah, that would be helpful, I
Okay,
think.
let's do that.
Thank you.
welcome back. We didn't want to put you through the pain of staring at the wall for 10 minutes. So, Mr. Calcutt, I hear you're at the point where you're willing to cast a vote.
I am. So we talked about how, the candidates present two very different backgrounds and approaches to the position. One of which is more structured and traditional in their approach, proven and already utilized and applied, whereas the other is more theoretical in nature and as impressive and captivating as it was, presents us with, the opportunity of somebody who doesn't have the base of experience to fall into the role and to kind of learn and see goes. Given where we are as a town and the challenges that we face ahead of us, I think that the new perspective would be welcomed and would absolutely be successful, presented with some of the things that we have in front of us. However, I feel like a more proven structure and base of experience would serve us best in the short term, and allow us to kind of feed off of the previous experiences and what's worked and what hasn't worked in the past. I want to reiterate that I don't believe that either would not work out for the town. I think both would be very successful. But I think that from where I sit today, that I would rather base that on a proven track record of experience and applied methodology, as opposed to something that hasn't yet really been applied. So I think Blythe would get my vote.
I think you gave a very good comparison of that. I am very much intrigued with Mr. Borg. I think that at some point in time, in some community, he will be dynamic. But I think there is a little bit more, risk is not the right word, but I think there is a little bit more, well, I don't know another word. If you can help me with one, I'd gratefully take it. But, and I don't mean to imply that Blythe is a safe approach. I think she's a very professional approach. I support your opinion. I think she'd be very good.
I think they both would be very good, but
But I am intrigued by Mr. Borg, no question about it. But she can step in tomorrow and do the job.
absolutely.
There'll be very little breakdown, there'll be very little gaps in terms of her startup time. I liked her demeanor. I think she will do well with the department heads. I don't sense any type of control or I don't sense that at all.
Mhm.
So I support your opinion. You want to make a motion?
I would move that we enter into contract negotiations to make Blythe Robinson the next town administrator.
I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have a decision. I want to thank, some of you are here, but some of you are not. I really want to thank the screening committee for all the hard work that you have done. Mr. Kleiser, Chief Stone, Susan Kelly, who am I missing? Cole, Ingrid Lardy, who came onto the committee and helped us at this point in time. Tom Doyle from the Norfolk School Committee. Mike G. from the King Philip School Committee. Who am I missing? I think that's it. You spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy. We owe you a debt of gratitude. You've had to do it twice, but I think somehow we ended up in a very good place. Sometimes things happen for the right reasons. So thank you all for the hard effort. Bernie, you brought us 3 terrific candidates. So we appreciate it. And Scott, I know you've suffered through all of this and kept the road straight as best you can, so we appreciate all your work on this as well. So we have a decision.
We do.
We do. We will contact her, and I assume she's actually readily available.
Yes, she is.
So that's the good news, too. All right.
Great.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.